Baron Fedra saw a carriage leaving New Luika territory bearing Duchess Elia's crest. He'd been trying to figure out who had been helping me all this time, and now he thought he had his answer. A Grand Magus backing me from the shadows. He kicked himself even harder for cutting ties with me after my father died. This time, he hadn't come to repair our relationship himself. He'd brought his daughter Lena, my former fiancée, to do it for him. Lena and I were childhood friends. When we were little, she used to say she'd marry me. Then somewhere along the way she changed, grew colder. When her father canceled our engagement, she'd said nothing, just gone quiet. Now Fedra wanted her to win me back. He was certain that if she became my wife, and I eventually made count, his whole family would rise with me. He was confident in his daughter's beauty. Lena stared out the carriage window, remembering an afternoon years ago. She'd tried to discipline Elialu, just a maid, in her eyes, and I'd stepped in front of Elialu to protect her. Lena had felt like a criminal. She'd never understood why I treated a servant like she was more important than my own fiancé. She didn't want to come. She knew she was just a bargaining chip in her father's hand. But she had no choice. I understand, father. I was working at my desk when Elialu came in looking uneasy. Before she could explain, I heard a voice at the door. It's me, Linwei. Long time no see. Lena curtsied perfectly, lifting her noble dress without a wrinkle. Her pale golden hair and pretty face were exactly as I remembered. I hadn't expected to see her again. What are you doing here? My voice was cold. No warmth, no nostalgia. I just wanted to see my childhood friend. After all, technically you're still my fiancé. The engagement had never been publicly canceled. Both families had kept it quiet to save face. No, I'm not. Your father destroyed our family's relationship. You know that. If you want to talk as an old friend, fine. But if you mention fiancé again, I'll have the guards escort you out. I'm sorry for my father's behavior, Linwei. I shook my head. You don't need to apologize. You were just a tool for his marriage alliance. You didn't even like me when I was a baron's son, did you? I smiled bitterly. I never forgot that afternoon when she went after Elialu. I'd put myself between them, and the look of terror on Elialu's face was burned into my memory. Elialu wasn't just a maid to me. She was my family, the only real family I had in this world. Anyone who tried to hurt my family was my enemy. Lena noticed Elialu standing behind me. Even she had to admit, Elialu was beautiful. As a baron's daughter, the only advantage Lena had over Elialu was her title. Not in looks, not in warmth. How nice, Lena said quietly. You still spoil your maid. If that's all you came to say, you can leave now. Deep disappointment filled her eyes. After all these years, nothing had changed. She was supposed to be the fiancée. She was supposed to be the one protected. But it was always the maid standing behind me, always the maid I shielded. She said nothing more, just looked at me in silence. Head maid, please show Miss Lena to a guest room. Make sure she's comfortable. I wasn't going to throw a baron's daughter out on the street. That would look petty and hurt my reputation. But if I ever had to choose between my reputation and Elialu, I'd pick Elialu without hesitation. After Lena left, I reached over and held Elialu's hand. She'd been trembling slightly. Feeling my warmth, she finally calmed down. No matter what, I would always stand in front of her. That was a promise I'd made to myself long ago. And Lena's return changed nothing. 10 large crates sat neatly in my courtyard, each stamped with the Far East Trading Company's seal. Each one held 10,000 Norrance gold coins, 100,000 total, all earned from Bigland's weapon sales. My mines were a bottomless money machine. It looked like a fortune, but I ran the numbers and felt less excited. Recruiting 1,000 new soldiers cost 100 gold in signing bonuses alone. Outfitting them in full iron armor, even with the trading company's discount, ran about 10,000 gold for 1,000 men. Horse armor was even pricier. Add in death benefits, daily expenses, and raw materials for Bigland's forge, and this money wouldn't last long. 2,000 soldiers sounded like a lot, but wasn't nearly enough. And these were all basic infantry. No special units, no mages, no griffin riders. Those cost real fortunes. I needed more income. I doubted Zaluk would raid Rima again this year. We'd already taken their plains and forest. If there was another campaign, it'd probably target Yade instead. Either way, it didn't concern me right now. After finishing the day's paperwork, I headed to the slave trading house. The fat manager had sent word that morning. Fresh merchandise had arrived. He was waiting at the door, grinning like I was made of gold. He'd seen the Far East Trading Company's coin-filled crates rolling into my estate. To him, I wasn't a viscount. I was a walking treasury. In the yard, carriages still loaded with slaves had their black coverings pulled back. What I saw surprised me. These weren't human, they were lizard men. Gray and black scales covered most of their bodies, though their limbs were human-sized. Each had a long, scaly tail. Besides the slave collars, they wore heavy shackles on their wrists and ankles. I scanned them. The males had impressive stats. One hit Martial 89 with scale hardening and partial magic immunity, rated A-. The females averaged lower, but were still solid. I asked about the extra restraints. The magic immunity, viscount. Some of them can resist the collar's enchantment to varying degrees. The shackles add an extra layer of safety. Made sense. If I could train these lizard men, they'd be formidable soldiers. Over 200 of them. That wouldn't come cheap. How much? The fat man's eyes gleamed. 3,000 gold each individually. Buy them all, 50,000. He explained they'd been captured from a southern continent tribe near the Beastman borders. The operation had cost him 20,000 in expenses alone. 50,000 was actually a steep discount, his way of investing in my future. A viscount who'd soon be a count, controlling all the trade taxes in this territory. Smart businessman. I walked along the cages, inspecting each one. Most of the lizard men glared at me with hatred. One growled threateningly until my guard drew his sword, and it went silent instantly. Their stats were genuinely worth the price, and taming wouldn't be a problem. The slave collars would keep them in line. Then I spotted her in the corner. A female lizard man with brilliant white scales, completely different from the others' gray and black. There was a strange beauty to her. The other females kept their distance, giving her a wide berth even in the cramped space. Reyna, Martial, 108, Strategy, 40, Loyalty, 0. Talents, White Dragon Bloodline, Dragon Scale Hardening, Dragon Spirit Blessing. Rating, S, Dragon. Among all these lizard men, there was one carrying the blood of a white dragon. Dragons are the strongest creatures on this continent. The powerful ones can even change their size at will, which means they sometimes breed with other species. One of Reyna's parents had to be a white dragon. I swallowed my excitement and made my decision on the spot. I'll take them all. Shall I send someone to your castle for the gold, or will you have it delivered? The fat man's face crinkled with joy. Your credit is good with me, Viscount. We've done business before. Send it whenever you like, or just let me know and I'll come collect it. He called his guards over. Move all these slaves to the Viscount's estate immediately. I learned Reyna's story from the other lizard men. She was an abandoned baby, raised by her grandmother, the tribe's only mage, a rare and respected figure. Her grandmother told her the white scales meant purity and beauty. 3 years ago, the old woman went out one afternoon and never came back. Without her protector, Reyna discovered the truth. White scales meant bad luck. The distance others had kept wasn't respect, it was fear and disgust. She became the village punching bag. Kids beat her up for fun. She survived on rabbits and wild vegetables. When Norrent's soldiers raided their village and enslaved everyone, she didn't feel sad. She felt relieved. Seeing her tormentors suffer the same fate gave her a strange sense of balance. After the maids cleaned her up, she turned out to be stunning. Unlike the other lizard men who had scales covering their faces, Reyna looked mostly human. White scales only on her arms and stomach, smooth skin everywhere else. Delicate porcelain features, long red hair falling to her waist, red eyes, and tiny white scales glittering on her ears. 2 small bumps on her forehead looked like horns trying to grow. Even Elyaloo couldn't stop staring. They had to cut a hole in the maid uniform for her thick tail. Once she was dressed, she was breathtaking. I settled the 200 lizard men on unused land outside the manor, an abandoned orchard. My guards helped them build wooden houses, and the lizard men worked so hard that over 200 shelters went up in a day and a half. I put the males into military training and gave the females freedom to work as they pleased. The males agreed to serve without much resistance. They wore slave collars anyway, and if I kept my promises about pay and food, loyalty would follow naturally. But my people weren't happy. Norrent's citizens despised non-humans. Using lizard men as expendable cannon fodder was one thing, but I'd given them land, housing, and equal treatment. The grumbling grew loud enough that my butler warned me. If word reached the king that I was some kind of radical noble coddling subhumans, I'd go from most promising viscount to disgraceful outcast overnight. No business partners, no growth, no army expansion. So I made a public announcement. The lizard men were my property, not residents. They wouldn't settle permanently or receive citizen rights. This was temporary training accommodation only. My word carried weight because I'd always kept my promises. The people calmed down. It frustrated me. The racism here ran deeper than I'd imagined. I wanted these lizard men to settle, grow, and become a loyal community. But that wasn't possible in Norrance. Not yet. Reyna adapted quickly to life in the castle. She cleaned, served tea when Elialu was busy, and was generally well-behaved. She had complicated feelings about her fellow lizard men. They tormented her, but the little kindness she'd received in life had also come from them. One day, I asked her casually, "Reyna, you're pretty strong, aren't you?" With a martial score of 108, higher than even Norrell, I already knew the answer. Yes, she admitted. She'd broken several plates when she first started as a maid because she couldn't control her strength. The head maid had been surprisingly forgiving. "Come with me to the training grounds." Akshin jogged over when he saw me. He peeked behind me, looking a bit disappointed when he saw Reyna instead of Baidi. "Akshin, how's training going?" "I never slack off, my lord. Ready for battle any time." "Good. Then here's a test. Fight my maid. If you win, I'll knight you on the spot." His eyes lit up. He looked at Reyna, short, skinny, barely reaching his chin. "Easy money. Don't go back on your word." "I'll go easy on her, though. She looks fragile." The soldiers gathered around, laughing and heckling. "Let her have both hands free, Captain. Otherwise, it's embarrassing." Ankro watched with amusement, figuring his brother would win easily. Reyna was an undersized, untrained lizard man variant against a seasoned warrior. I patted Reyna's shoulder. "Want to fight him?" "You don't have to if you don't want to." She nodded calmly. This human looked strong, but about the same level as the villagers back home. Nothing special. "Master, do you want me to win?" "Of course. Win, and you never have to be a maid again. You can do whatever you want." Her eyes sparked. The dragon blood in her bones craved getting stronger far more than folding laundry. Akshin charged at full speed, planting a quick chop to the back of her neck. Reyna stood perfectly still, like a deer in torchlight. He smiled. Victory was his. Then a pale hand shot out and locked onto his left arm. The world spun. His back slammed into the dirt. A perfect shoulder throw. Dead silence. Akshin had no idea what had just happened. That tiny body contained that much power? "Well, Akshin," I said, breaking the quiet. "Looks like you missed your shot at knighthood. Don't say I didn't give you the chance. Earn it on the battlefield next time." "Yes, my lord." He stood, dusted himself off, and bowed to both Reyna and me. "In Norrance, you respect strength. Period." Reyna's white scales were opening and closing on her arms, releasing wisps of steam. That always happened when she got excited. She noticed me looking, got embarrassed, and quickly ducked behind me. I gave Reyna her own training schedule after she beat Akshin. She had real combat talent, and I figured with some proper training, she might even shine at the gladiator tournament someday. Baidi watched all of this with growing interest. She'd been observing me find talented people one after another, from slave markets, no less, and couldn't figure out how I kept getting lucky. She'd started thinking I was some kind of chosen one, blessed by fate. She didn't suspect I was a transmigrator, though. Apparently, I'd done a good job blending in. I spoke like a proper Norrance noble, never slipped up with earth words, and the locals all said I'd been like this since childhood. I'd actually been extra careful ever since Baidi arrived. Since her panel showed she was a transmigrator too. Her affinity toward me had reached 30. Not high, but affinity works differently from loyalty. At 30, we were solidly in, friendly, territory. That was exactly what I wanted. Build enough goodwill that if disaster ever struck, she'd lend a hand. In my spare time after paperwork, I racked my brain for ways to make money. As an ordinary guy from Earth, I had zero useful technical skills. I couldn't refine salt, build water mills, or do any of that classic transmigrative stuff. Distilling alcohol already existed here thanks to alchemy. Yate had spread the technique to both Rima and Norrance ages ago. So much for that idea. But then I noticed something. This world had butter and simple desserts like jam and pudding, but nobody had invented cream. If I could make cream bread, I'd have a product that nobles would go crazy for. Eggs and milk were luxury items here, so it'd only be affordable for the wealthy, but wealthy customers meant premium prices. I called Elialu to the kitchen. She brought eggs, milk, and butter from our small farm. After mixing and stirring until my arms went numb, a bowl of fluffy cream finally took shape. I added a touch of honey. I call this Luika cream, I told her. I scooped a bit onto my finger and offered it to her. She hesitated shyly, then licked it off. Her eyes went wide. Young master, this is incredible. I spread some on bread and handed it to her. The combination was irresistible. Every girl with a sweet tooth would fall for this. We stuffed ourselves, and then I got serious. Elialu, the recipe stays within the castle. Only the maids and Aquina can know. Everyone must keep it absolutely secret. She nodded. She understood what this meant. I trusted our maids because their loyalty scores were all above 80. They had almost no contact with outsiders, and I'd always treated them well. With Elialu and Aquina as my absolute confidants overseeing things, the secret was safe. My plan: produce a batch of cream and host a grand banquet, my 17th birthday party. Any noble who wanted to build relations with me would attend. I'd debut the cream at the feast, and once they tasted it, they'd be lining up to do business. I sent invitations to every noble in the area and all major trading companies. Everyone except Baron Fedra. The response was strong. Most nobles chose to attend: barons, viscounts, even some counts and a marquis or two. Dukes wouldn't come for a mere viscount's birthday, and the kings certainly wouldn't bother. But this was more than enough. Count Pharaohs received his invitation with particular interest. He'd already given me 300 warhorses, but hadn't deepened our connection much since. Now he wondered, was Duchess Alia behind this party? Whether she was or not, he'd definitely attend, and he'd bring a generous gift. As far as he knew, most nobles still hadn't figured out my connection to Alia. He still had a head start, and he intended to keep it. Welcome, esteemed Baron Weiss. The banquet is about to begin. Please come in. My butler greeted every arriving noble with a bow and took their gifts. The presents alone filled half a warehouse. The turnout exceeded even my expectations. Dozens of barons and viscounts, a good number of counts, and even a few marquises from the left-wing faction. My butler was stunned. I was just a viscount, and this many powerful nobles were giving me face. It made sense, though. After the autumn campaign disaster, I was the only one who'd come out shining. If I became a count, even dukes and the king might attend my events. The marquises had come partly because they'd received new territories nearby from the recent redistribution, and partly to test whether they could pull me into the left-wing camp. Baron Fedra showed up uninvited. I hadn't sent him an invitation, and he knew it. He had his butler announce him at the gate. My manager, not recognizing the history between us, went to check with Elialu. Elialu remembered everything. Oxiu being thrown out, the humiliation. But she delivered my message perfectly. Baron Fedra, our lord says he forgot to send your invitation. He deeply apologizes for the oversight and will personally make amends after the banquet. Flawless. Fedra's mouth twitched. He recognized the move. I'd acknowledged his presence publicly while making it clear the oversight was deliberate. But with so many nobles watching, he couldn't complain. I hadn't turned him away, so he had no grievance to voice. I let him in because this event had nearly a third of Norrent's nobility attending. Humiliating a baron here would make me look petty and arrogant. I was here to do business: weapons, cream, trade deals. My public image had to be spotless. If I'd indulged my personal feelings and shut him out, every noble would start looking for flaws in me. Even though Fedra had wronged me first impressions stick. I wasn't giving him that ammunition. Once everyone had arrived, I climbed the steps and addressed the crowd. I kept my speech short. Thank you for coming. Welcome to my birthday. Nothing groundbreaking. The nobles appreciated that I wasn't nervous speaking before this many powerful people. Some smiled knowingly. Of course, the man who'd raided George Fortress wasn't easily intimidated. Elialu hung on every word. This was her young master's moment, and she wasn't missing a second. Then I invited everyone to sit and told them I'd prepared a surprise. First came roasted venison from the local forests, golden, aromatic, well prepared. The barons were impressed, but the counts and above looked unimpressed. Standard fare. Then I had the maids bring out the cream bread. White, fluffy mounds of something unfamiliar sat atop fresh bread. Confused looks spread across the room. "What is this?" Guildmaster Weiss asked first, as expected. We'd done plenty of business together, and even he had never seen anything like it. "Allow me to introduce Luika cream, a specialty of Luika territory. It's sweet and delicious. Please try some." The nobles exchanged glances. Luika territory's specialty? This place used to be called St. Martin, and it never had any specialty worth mentioning. Weiss, ever the good sport, took the first bite. His face melted into genuine pleasure. After that, everyone dug in. The reaction was unanimous. The sweet, airy cream paired with soft bread was something entirely new and irresistible. "Viscount Linway, this specialty of yours is truly wonderful," a left-wing marquis announced. Once a marquis praised it publicly, compliments poured in from every direction. The merchant guild leaders stayed quiet, but I could see the gears turning behind their eyes. A dessert this good, exclusive to my territory, with distribution potential across all of Norrance. They were already calculating margins. Exactly as planned. After the banquet, I sent every noble home with glass jars of cream as parting gifts. They all accepted gladly. The stuff had made a real impression. Even Fedra got one jar, though everyone else got at least two. He didn't complain. The fact that I gave him anything at all probably surprised him. Once the last non-merchant noble left, Guildmaster Weiss sidled up to me. "Viscount Linway, this cream of yours is really something. Just as impressive as those swords you sold me. You flatter me, Weiss. It's nothing special. If you like it, I'll have my maids bring you more." He tried his usual move, dangling marriage prospects from counts' families if I'd joined Duke Simon's faction. I deflected the same way as always. We all serve Norrance and His Majesty. Even out here on the border, I do my part, shot down twice now, but he didn't seem surprised. The political pitch was really just a warm-up for business. "Is the cream difficult to make?" he asked. "Not terribly, but not simple either." Then came his opening offer. "I'll buy the recipe for 10,000 gold coins." That was a test. He wanted to see if I understood what I had. "Elialu, go get the guild master 2 more jars of cream." "Viscount, what do you?" I grabbed his hand warmly. "We're friends. You want cream, just ask. No need to pay." Weiss looked uncomfortable. "Please don't joke." I shrugged and waved Elialu off. "You started the jokes, not me." He sighed. "What price did you have in mind?" I held up one finger. 100,000, he frowned. Cream was clearly going to be popular, but if production costs were high and only nobles could afford it, he wasn't sure he'd break even. I shook my head. 1 million Norrance gold coins. His eyes nearly popped out. "You're insane. Unless this cream sells in Yade and Rima too, it can't possibly be worth that much." I patted his shoulder. "Trust me, it can. But here's what I'll do instead. I'll give you the recipe for free. You keep it absolutely secret. We split profits 50-50 on every sale." He thought about it. "No, 50-50 is too much when I'm covering all the material costs. It has to be even, and you need to guarantee the ingredients won't be expensive enough to make me lose money." "Fair enough. 1 jar costs less than a silver coin to make. But publicly, we'll say the ingredients are rare and expensive. Production cost of 5 gold minimum. We sell each jar for 10 gold coins." His eyes lit up. "At those margins, every jar sold would net me 5 gold in pure profit. Even at 10 gold a jar, nobles could afford it easily. Knights and adventurers at taverns could splurge on it occasionally too. Only common farmers would be priced out. But that was the point. Milk the wealthy before the recipe eventually leaked." "Deal," Weiss said. We signed a magic contract, an ancient, irreversible document powered by lost technology. Even a grand magus couldn't break its enchantment. These contracts cost 1,000 gold coins on the open market and are only used for truly important agreements. The terms: I provided the recipe free of charge, profits split 50-50. Weiss was bound to absolute secrecy. If the recipe leaked from his side, he owed me 1 million gold coins in penalties. We each pricked a finger and pressed blood to the parchment. It glowed briefly, then went still, binding and final. Weiss extended his hand with a smile. "To a profitable partnership, Viscount Linway. To a profitable partnership." Eliula's life had always been simple. She'd been trained from childhood to serve me, told that I was her everything. She accepted it without question. As she grew older, she learned what noble households were really like. Terrible stories about lords who got their maids pregnant at 15, old nobles with disgusting habits the servants gossiped about endlessly. She was lucky. I wasn't like that. I called her Lulu when I was happy. I always spoke gently to her. And what she remembered most was the day I stood between her and Lena. Lena, as the Baron's daughter, thought punishing a maid who got too close to her fiancé was perfectly normal. I ruined my relationship with Lena to protect Elialu. From that day on, she swore to stay by my side forever. Elialu's mother had a tragic life. A drunk noble used her and threw her out when he sobered up. Through bits and pieces of what her mother told her, Elialu suspected her father might be someone important in the left-wing faction. She didn't care. Her mother wandered pregnant to Luika territory, where my father Ryan took them in. Now both her mother and my father were gone. We only had each other. Today should have been a happy day. I'd just closed a huge business deal. But something was bothering Elialu. She shook the feeling away and carried my evening tea to the study like always. She knocked. No answer. Through the crack in the door, the room was dark. She figured I'd fallen asleep at my desk after a long day. She tiptoed in, set down the tea, and went to get a blanket. When she came back and reached for the oil lamp, a candle suddenly flickered to life on my desk. Elialu, come here, I whispered. She walked over and saw it. A single pink candle stuck into a piece of cream bread. Elialu, happy birthday, she froze. Then her eyes turned red. Happy birthday to you too, young master. We were born on the same day. She'd been a little disappointed all day, thinking I'd forgotten. She kept telling herself not to expect anything. But feelings don't listen to reason. Why are you crying? You must be tired from working all day on what's supposed to be your birthday. No, helping you is Elialu's honor. Blow out the candle. And make a wish. I've been doing this for her secretly since we were 6. 11 years now. 11 wishes. Every year she wished for my health, my happiness, for Luika territory to prosper. And somehow, every wish had come true. So this year, her 17th birthday, she decided to be a little selfish. She wished that I would look at her more, that there might be a place for her in my heart. Her face flushed as she opened her eyes, glancing at me nervously, afraid I'd somehow read her mind. I looked the same as always. She relaxed. Meanwhile, Reina had been training harder than any soldier in my army. She'd learned basic combat from action, slashing, thrusting, and started running before dawn every day. Her appetite doubled. The white dragon blood in her veins made her hungry for battle. But she sensed that neither human nor lizardman training methods were unlocking her full potential. Something deeper was locked inside her. Then Baidi approached her. The succubus empress had been watching Reina for a while. Today was the first time she spoke to her. Your training isn't working well. Want me to show you a better way? Reina's scales prickled with instinctive alertness around Baidi, though she couldn't explain why. A lizard man and a succubus shouldn't have any connection. What Reina didn't know was that Baidi had a symbiotic contract with a powerful frost dragon. She'd recognized immediately that Reina wasn't an ordinary lizard man. She carried true dragon blood. Through her contract, Baidi had learned some dragon incantations and inherited knowledge. It would be perfect for Reina. Really? Reina didn't hesitate. Getting stronger to repay my kindness had become almost an obsession. Come closer. Baidi reached out and touched Reina's forehead with a pale finger. A torrent of energy crashed through Reina's mind. Visions of soaring over mountains, flying across endless oceans. Power surged through her blood. Every cell in her body seemed to sing. When Baidi pulled her hand away, 2 gleaming white horns had sprouted from the small bumps on Reina's forehead. Her dragon heritage was awakening. With this inherited dragon memory, Reina would improve dramatically. Frost dragons and white dragons were closely related species, so the knowledge fit her perfectly. Baidi's curse had been half-purged during her quiet time at my estate. Helping Reina unlock her dragon power was her way of repaying a small piece of the debt she felt she owed me. Weiss worked fast. Within a week of getting my recipe, he'd produced over 10,000 jars of cream. Following my advice, he tried different sugars but agreed that honey gave the best flavor. At 10 gold coins per jar, with production costs under 1 silver, it was practically pure profit. The only headache was sourcing enough eggs and milk. He bought up everything nearby, then covered his tracks by also purchasing large quantities of random vegetables and fruit so nobody could guess the recipe from his shopping patterns. Smart man. The groundwork I'd laid at the birthday banquet paid off perfectly. Nobles who'd tasted the cream were already craving more, and those who hadn't tried it were desperate to see what the fuss was about. All 10,000 jars sold out in a single week. That was 100,000 gold coins in revenue. My half came to 50,000 in 1 week. To put that in perspective, the Far East Trading Company's total annual revenue was only about 1 million gold. We'd just done 1/10 of their yearly business in 7 days. I think Weiss finally understood why I'd asked for 1 million gold when he tried to buy the recipe outright. At this rate, 1 million was a bargain. But he seemed content with the 50-50 split. A good merchant knows when to be satisfied. Meanwhile, at the Magic Academy, things I only heard about later were unfolding. Aaliyah was enjoying afternoon tea in the Academy Gardens. Cream bread with strawberries and blueberries, cream-topped pudding, and red tea. My product had already conquered the capital's dessert scene. She called Saruka over and teased her about our progress during her last visit. Saruka turned red and tried to change the subject. "Try this," Aaliyah said, offering her some cream. "It's a Luika territory specialty." Saruka was confused. She didn't know about any specialty from my territory. One bite of the cream bread and her eyes went wide. No girl with a sweet tooth could resist it. "Your Lin Wei must be making good money now," Aaliyah remarked. "Quite capable. No wonder he can afford your tuition." Then Aaliyah's tone shifted, just slightly. "Saruka, there's something you should understand. You're an incredibly talented mage. I don't want you to ever go down the wrong path. If you do, I won't go easy on you." Saruka didn't understand. "Teacher, I haven't touched any forbidden magic." Aaliyah just smiled. "I believe you. Consider this a small piece of advice." What Saruka didn't grasp, and what Aaliyah was really worried about, was the future. Humans don't live as long as beast folk. Saruka, being part cat tribe, could live for centuries. Someday, inevitably, I would grow old and die while Saruka was still young. Aaliyah had seen it before. When someone powerful enough loses the person they love, the temptation to reach for forbidden magic, to cheat death, to bring someone back, becomes overwhelming. She'd already had to clean house once in her long life. She never wanted to do it again. "Reina, you grew horns." I stared at the gleaming white dragon horns on her head with genuine curiosity. They were about a finger's length, curving slightly upward like little bull horns. Combined with her delicate face, she finally looked like a proper dragon girl. Her voice was tiny. She was scared I'd be disgusted. A lizard man with horns didn't make any sense, and she already had the cursed white scales. "Can I touch them?" The horns felt warm and smooth, nothing like deer antlers or cattle horns. It was like dipping my hand into a heated pool. In the still cool spring air, the sensation was addictive. I kept touching them until steam started rising from her scales and her face turned apple red. I reluctantly let go. I checked her stats and nearly fell over. Reina, Martial, 148, Strategy, 60, Loyalty, 100. Talents, White Dragon Bloodline, Dragon Scale Hardening, Dragon Spirit Blessing, Frost Dragon Inheritance. Rating, S. Her Martial had jumped 40 points. Strategy up 20. And she gained Frost Dragon Inheritance as a new talent. White dragons and frost dragons were related species, but I couldn't figure out how she'd awakened a frost dragon's legacy. It didn't seem like a bad thing, though, so I didn't overthink it. "Reina, would you like to become a sworn knight of Luika territory?" I held her hand, my expression earnest. She looked stunned. "Reina is willing. There's more. I want you to compete in the gladiator tournament next month. Would you do that for me? If you don't want to, I won't force you. It's just a small request from me. As a member of the Luika family, Reina is willing, no hesitation." She understood what the crest meant to my family. I'd sold our ancestral one to save the territory. Now she could win it back for us. She wanted to repay everything I'd given her. 2 weeks later, the first profit payment from the cream business arrived. 20 crates, 10,000 gold each. 200,000 gold coins total, just from the first billing cycle. With this money, I could finally build the army I needed. I put Akshin and Ankro in charge of expanding the guard to 5,000 soldiers. That cost about 200,000 in recruitment, equipment, and supplies. I bought 700 more northern warhorses from the Far East Trading Company at a discounted price of 200 gold each, a perk of our cream partnership. bringing my cavalry to 1,000 riders. The rest went toward plate armor, chain mail, and horse armor. Bigland could finally take a break from forging weapons to sell. 5,000 elite troops, 1,000 cavalry, an advanced mage in residence. This was real power, count-level strength, maybe even surpassing some marquises. And Narancel had confirmed that several civilians I'd sent him did have magical aptitude. Training mages was expensive, but money was no longer a problem. My cream was generating 100,000 gold coins per week, and that was just within Norrance. Once it spread to Rima and Yade, the numbers would multiply. In a quiet room of my castle, Bidey sat alone with a jar of Luika cream. She'd finally tried it after Elyalou offered her some at lunch. One taste, and 300 years of memories came flooding back. A gentle afternoon breeze. A college campus. A normal girl eating cream bread between classes. Before this world, before the throne, before the blood and betrayal. Cream wasn't something that existed in this world, until I made it. And there was only one explanation. Was Linway a transmigrator? The thought hit her hard. Everyone around me was exceptional. The cream's invention was too specific to be coincidence. She wanted it to be true, wanted me to be from the same world she'd once called home. But she was also afraid of being wrong. In the end, she decided not to ask. Even if I was a transmigrator, what would change? She put down the empty jar and stared out the window. Some questions were better left unanswered. The Eagle Gladiator Badge is one of the highest honors in Norrance. You have to fight your way through every opponent and win the whole tournament to get it, and the king himself gives it to you. Any citizen can enter, but nobles almost always win because they have better resources and stronger warriors. Magic isn't allowed in the arena, but winning gets you noticed by the royal family. I got on the carriage with Reyna and headed to the capital. I couldn't miss this event. A lot of nobles already knew I'd sold an Eagle badge to the royal family before, and that's probably why I was still just a viscount even after capturing 2 Rima royals. If Reyna could do well in this tournament, I'd have a real shot at becoming an earl. Reyna, win or lose, it doesn't matter, I told her. Your safety comes first. She looked at me with those sincere eyes, clearly moved. She said she wouldn't let me down. Honestly, it made me feel a little guilty. I'm not as noble as I seem. My grandfather Edward once told me that powerful nobles control their servants through emotion, not violence. Feelings are a far more terrifying weapon than force. When I look at myself honestly, aside from Elyalou, I've had selfish motives with most of my people. But then again, without me, would their lives really be better? The arena sat next to the biggest castle in the capital. The streets around it were the most bustling in the whole city, full of merchant headquarters, lesser nobles, knights, and adventurers. Priests stood by everywhere, ready to heal wounded fighters, for a price, of course. I'd seen crowds before, but Reyna clearly hadn't. She shrank back from all the staring eyes and grabbed the edge of my coat. I smiled and took her small white hand. She relaxed a little after that. Funny, she's a dragon girl with a combat rating of 168, but she's actually a bit socially anxious. My 2 elite guards cleared the way, and after about half an hour we reached the arena entrance. The gatekeeper recognized my Viscount crest and let us right in. The first person I ran into was Vis, who was chatting with some baron. He grinned and pulled me into a hug. Viscount Linway, I've been dying to see you. Normally nobles just shake hands. A hug like that signals a very close relationship, almost like family. But Vis was just in a good mood because we'd both made a lot of money recently. Other nobles noticed and started watching us. Vis was only a baron, but everyone knew he worked under Duke Simon, so people gave him respect. As for me, I was the new star of the kingdom. The guy who captured 2 Rima royals and invented the cream bread that was sweeping the capital. People looked at my young face and probably wondered how Baron Ryan ever produced a son like me. The arena was a huge oval, ringed with rows and rows of stone seats stacked like a honeycomb. Nobles got cushioned spots with soft blankets. Commoners could watch too, but they sat farther back on hard stone. A baron got 1 seat, a viscount got 2, an earl 3, a marquis 5, and dukes and royals got as many as they needed. Reyna sat beside me, nervous. I could feel the strange looks from the other nobles. Most of them thought she was a lizard folk, and having one sitting in the noble section raised eyebrows. Some admitted she was pretty cute for a mutant lizard, with those pure white scales, but a few openly disapproved, saying I was being improper for a noble. I didn't bother explaining. I looked over toward the Duke's section and found Saruka watching me. She wore a white mage robe today, and when our eyes met, she gave me a shy little smile. That moment didn't go unnoticed. Michel, the man who'd been chasing Saruka without success, caught it all. He narrowed his eyes like a snake about to strike. I looked away from Saruka. We couldn't afford to draw attention to our connection. Not here, not now. I needed to at least become a proper earl first, with the reputation and military strength to match. Or Saruka would need to reach the level of a magic master. Only then could we stop caring about what others thought. Even after I turned away, I could feel her still sneaking glances at me. Her teacher Arya must have noticed too, because she tapped Saruka on the head and whispered, "You don't want people finding out about you in Lin Wei, do you?" That seemed to snap Saruka out of it. Michel, the third prince who'd been chasing her without success, was already watching. Exposing our relationship now would only hurt me. After we took our seats, it was time to register for the tournament. I didn't go with Reina. The registration area wasn't far, and I figured it'd be good practice for her social skills. The clerk looked at Reina in her maid outfit and assumed she was lost. "Miss Maid, are you looking for your master? The guard over there can help you find them." Reina went quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm here to register for the Eagle Gladiator Tournament." The clerk was stunned. She told him she was representing the Luica family as a knighted warrior. He clearly couldn't believe it. The rising viscount with the legendary reputation was sending a maid to fight? Then a brawny swordsman named Hugo started mocking her. This viscount must have lost his mind, sending a subhuman maid to the arena. "Go back to warming your master's bed, little maid." He worked for Duke Simon, so he feared no one below the royal family. With the left faction riding high, nobody dared challenge him. Reina's fists clenched. She didn't care about being insulted herself, but he'd insulted me. That was her line. Things were about to explode when Count Pharaoh stepped in. He was a hefty nobleman, and his cold voice cut through like frost. "Hugo, how dare you insult a noble?" Hugo tried to brush it off as friendly advice, but Pharaoh shut him down hard. "You're just one of Simon's dogs. Don't do anything to stain the Simon family name, or your body will be floating in the moat by morning." That shut Hugo up. But as the clerk finished Reina's registration, Hugo leaned in close and whispered, "Pray you don't face me out there, little maid. I'll make you regret being born." I swear it. Reina didn't even look at him. She just walked away toward the fighter's rest area, giving Pharaoh's a grateful glance on her way out. Pharaoh's had his own reasons for stepping in. He knew what others didn't. That behind me stood Arya, a true powerhouse. He understood I'd never join the left faction. I was almost certainly going to become a rising star of a new faction, and getting on my good side now meant future rewards. Vis was watching the whole thing too, relieved that Pharaoh's had defused the situation. He was probably wondering why I'd send a maid to fight in the tournament. But after all our successful deals together, he'd come to trust my judgment almost blindly. Our business had earned him so much gold for the Far East Trading Company that Duke Simon had hinted he might be promoted from Baron to Viscount. So he was more eager than ever to keep working with me. There were two favorites to win this year's tournament. The first was the King's Fighter, a rare dragon-human hybrid who'd already won the Eagle Badge 3 years in a row, earning a lot of face for King Ziluk XIII. The second was a terrifying assassin working for Duke Reese, a former main fighter of an S-rank adventurer party. Rumor had it he carried an enchanted dagger that could even damage dragon scales. The sun was high when the tournament officially began. The first match featured an adventurer with a sword and shield against Hugo, the swordsman who'd clashed with Reina earlier, though I didn't know about that yet. I checked Hugo's stats. Combat rating of 102, with talents in one-handed sword, shield mastery, and brute strength. A-rank evaluation. He was strong, even higher than Norrell, but still far below Reina. His opponent only had a combat rating of 60 with no special talents. I already knew how this would end. Sure enough, Hugo cut the adventurer's head off in just 2 exchanges. Blood sprayed everywhere. The crowd cheered like maniacs. Norans has a twisted love for blood and strength. That's how the arena works. If you don't surrender fast enough, you die. Hugo flashed a bloodthirsty grin and looked right at where I was sitting, like he was sending me a message. I didn't understand why, but his eyes made me uncomfortable. The viscounts around me were praising his strength, saying he'd make at least the top 3. Duke Simon stroked his beard with satisfaction. The first round went on. Most of the arena floor was soaked in blood. Only the ones who surrendered quickly survived. I'd gotten used to death by now, but I still didn't care for this bloody tradition. Then it was Reyna's turn. She walked out holding the standard-issue longsword and round iron shield I'd given her, Luica territory military equipment. Nothing fancy, but solid. Her opponent was a knight from an earl's household, combat rating around 70, B rank. No threat at all. But when Reyna stepped into the arena in her maid outfit, every noble's jaw dropped. Even the royal section went silent. People started murmuring, then shouting. The commoners' seats erupted with insults. They thought she was mocking the sacred stage. King Zeluk said nothing, but his expression made it clear he wasn't pleased. He'd be asking the registration clerk about which family sent her. The knight facing Reyna was at least polite about it. Miss Maid, if I were you, I'd surrender immediately. This isn't a place for games. Reyna's voice came out cold. Thank you for your concern. Please fight with everything you have, so you won't have any regrets. The smell of rust and blood filled the air around her. The ground was stained black from all the blood that had soaked into it. She hated fighting, but she would do it for me. The knight charged at her with his shield up, sword ready to run her through. Reyna stood perfectly still. No panic, no fear, just those cold red eyes. At the last moment she raised her shield, and the knight smirked, thinking she was going to try to block him head-on. But she didn't block. She sidestepped with incredible speed and slammed her shield into him like a battering ram. The knight was wearing full iron armor, but it didn't matter. The impact sent him flying across the arena. He smashed into the wall and went unconscious instantly. Reyna raised her sword to signal victory. The arena went dead silent for a moment. Then it exploded. A subhuman maid had just launched a fully armored knight across the arena with one arm. Everything the crowd had been shouting, the insults, the mockery, the accusations of disrespecting the sacred stage, all of it flipped into pure awe. Round after round, the tournament finally reached the top 16. By now the sun had long set and 2 blood-red moons hung in the sky, as if announcing how cruel this competition truly was. Huge bonfires and rows of torches lit up the arena bright as day. The fights would continue deep into the night until a champion was crowned. Reyna had crushed 4 knights in a row to reach this stage, every single one taken out in a single blow. The crowd was starting to see her differently now. She was terrifying, a dark horse nobody saw coming. In Norans, betting on the sacred tournament was forbidden on pain of death, even for nobles. Otherwise, a lot of gamblers would have lost everything tonight. A heavy horn sounded, and the 16 finalists stood in the center of the arena, soaking in the cheers. Some unaffiliated adventurers were already eyeing the noble section, hoping to catch someone's attention even if they lost. Everyone knew the dragon-human hybrid had won 3 years straight, and this year there was also the Duke's assassin and now this unstoppable maid. Reyna stood out, the smallest fighter with the most dominant record. People were starting to wonder if she could actually challenge the dragon warrior. When nobles asked which family she belonged to, they were stunned to hear the name Luica. My reputation was growing fast. Almost no noble in Norans didn't know who I was now. Then came the bracket draw, and fate had a sense of humor. Hugo drew Reyna in the very first round. Hugo had performed well too, finishing his opponents in brutal fashion, always leaving the arena drenched in blood. The crowd loved him for it. So when they saw it was Hugo versus Reyna, the excitement was electric. Standing across from her, Hugo flashed a cold grin. "Little maid, I told you not to let me catch you. Those losers actually let you reach the top 16? Did you sleep with them to make them throw their fights? Go tell your master. Any lord who sends his maid to serve other men is nothing but a spineless coward." He laughed that ugly laugh of his. But Reyna didn't flinch. The scales on her arms rippled slightly, something like vapor seeping from between them. Her already red eyes seemed to glow even deeper. She didn't care what anyone said about her. But insulting me, that crossed her line. "I've never killed anyone before," she said, her voice like ice. "But today, I will kill you." Hugo kept taunting, but I noticed his shield never dropped. He was on guard. He knew anyone who'd made it this far was dangerous. He was still thinking about how to counter her shield bash technique when, suddenly, His head was no longer attached to his body. I barely saw what happened. One moment they were facing each other. The next, Reyna was flicking blood off her sword and Hugo's head was rolling across the dirt, his eyes still wide with confusion. He died without ever understanding what hit him. The arena went completely silent. Then someone shouted. She used magic, but before the royal court mage could respond, Duchess Arya spoke up. She did not use any magic. Coming from a grand mage, that settled it. The silence broke into the loudest roar of the night. Whistles and cheering filled the air. Now everyone understood why Itsina made to compete. Her strength was on par with the dragon warrior, maybe even beyond. Both the dragon man and the assassin narrowed their eyes. They'd been treating each other as the biggest threat, but Reyna had shattered that balance completely. The assassin realized that even pushing his body to its absolute limit, he couldn't match her speed. The dragon warrior was calculating whether his dragon scales could withstand her iron sword. He was confident they could, since her weapon had no magical enchantment. The red dragon blood in his veins was boiling. He was already imagining taking her head and offering the glory to the king. The dragon man defeated Duke Rhys's assassin in the semi-final. The assassin lost his right arm. His famous enchanted dagger couldn't even scratch the dragon scales. The dragon warrior, Gaedlin, licked the blood from his lips like he wanted more. I checked his stats. Combat rating of 148, with special talents in dragon scale hardening and red dragon's power. A+ evaluation. Overall weaker than Reyna, but those talents meant she wouldn't have an easy time like before. Reyna's own special abilities, aside from the Frost Dragon inheritance, had barely ever triggered. When they faced each other in the arena, Gaedlin sniffed the air. A white dragon scent. "Tell me your name, little white dragon." "Reyna," she said. "I'm a lizard folk." "Are you a lizard folk too?" "I've never seen a red one." "Did you also mutate?" She was completely serious. Gaedlin stared at her in disbelief. He was a red dragon hybrid. In pure blood, sure, but he refused to be lumped in with lizard folk. Before he'd proven his strength, people had made that same mistake, and he'd suffered endless humiliation for it. "Little white dragon, you've made me angry," he growled. "I'll tear you apart and devour your flesh." He charged with terrifying speed, leaving an afterimage where he'd stood. Reyna raised her shield just in time. Sparks flew from the impact, and the iron shield was nearly split in half, completely ruined after a single exchange. The force made her hands go numb. She threw the shield away. Defense wasn't her strength, speed was. She burst forward even faster than Gaedlin, appearing behind him in a flash. Her sword struck his back, but his dragon scales were unbelievably tough. Even though Biglin had forged her sword to be stronger than average, it only left a tiny scratch. A normal blade would have shattered on contact. They clashed again and again in a fierce chase around the arena. The crowd went wild. Nobody had ever lasted this many rounds against Gaedlin. The nobles were impressed, the royal family included. King Zeluk XIII himself was watching Reyna closely. Compared to the ugly Gaedlin, the pretty subhuman maid was much more appealing. She could fight, and she was easy on the eyes. Some nobles were already thinking she'd be a much better prize than the dragon warrior. After more than a dozen exchanges, something changed in Reyna. Heat surged through her body, and a power rose up from deep inside. I saw the ghostly image of a white dragon flickering behind her for just a moment. Dragon Spirit Blessing. I'd never seen her special talent activate before. White scales spread rapidly across her arms and face, and the small horns on her head grew longer. Battle fury burned in her eyes, and she couldn't hold it back anymore. Gaedlin's dragon scales stood on end. His red dragon blood was screaming at him. Whatever Reyna had just become, she was something he could never defeat. Before he could even react, she drove her broken sword straight through his chest. The blade, empowered by that incredible force, punched through his dragon scales like they were glass. Then she threw a punch at his face, and he was out cold. Reyna won. The crowd erupted. The Eagle Gladiator Championship belonged to the Luica family. She hadn't killed Gaedlin, just knocked him unconscious. In fact, the only person she killed in the entire tournament was Hugo. Her grandmother had told her 3 years ago, before she disappeared, that a true strong person needs their own beliefs to use their power well. Reyna's home had been invaded by soldiers once, and she understood better than anyone how precious life was. These fighters had families, fathers, sons, husbands. She knew the thought was maybe naive, but she held on to it anyway. She looked up at me in the stands. I waved at her, and just like that, all the exhaustion seemed to drain from her body. She'd done it. She'd won back the glory that should have been mine all along. I hung the brand new Eagle Gladiator badge on my study wall, on a big display stand where anyone walking in would see it right away. Unlike the one grandfather Edward had earned, this one belonged to me and Reyna. It meant I'd reclaimed the Luica family's honor. Elialu brought Reyna in, holding her hand. The scales that had covered her face and back during the fight were mostly gone now, with just a few left on her hands and stomach. Actually, she had fewer scales than when I first met her. Her dragon horns had shrunk back to their normal size, small, cute, and pure white. I waved her over. "White Enchantress, you're the biggest hero of Luica territory." She blushed at the nickname. The people of Norans had given it to her because of the impression she left at the tournament. The dragon warrior she'd beaten, Gaedlin, used to be called the Gladiator Destroyer. But Reyna's nickname wasn't just about winning. It was about how unforgettable she was. "Master, did I disappoint you?" she asked, her red eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name. "Of course not, Reyna. Even if you hadn't won the badge, I'd never be disappointed in you." Her thick dragon tail started swaying happily, just like how Saruka's cat tail always gave away her feelings. Meanwhile, in the cold royal palace, King Ziluk XIII sat on his throne while Gaedlin knelt before him, face to the ground. The king couldn't understand how a broken iron sword with no enchantment had pierced Gaedlin's dragon scales through brute force alone. When he asked, Gaedlin admitted Reyna had far thicker dragon blood than his own, possibly a direct descendant of a pure-blooded dragon. The king's eyes narrowed. A young dragon girl with powerful blood. She could serve in his harem and as a fighter. He considered taking her, but Reyna was known to serve the Luica family. Stealing her outright would cause an uproar. He'd have to use money and power to make her submit. Ziluk believed there was nothing gold couldn't solve, and if gold failed, force would do. A month passed after the tournament, and I still hadn't received my promotion to Earl. By all rights, winning the Gladiator Championship should have been enough. But there was complete silence from the palace, as if my victory didn't matter at all. I didn't let it bother me too much. Even without the title, I was doing well. The cream business had let me expand my guard force to 5,000 soldiers, including 1,000 fully equipped heavy cavalry. That put me among the strongest earls in Norans, even though I was still technically a viscount. On top of the 20,000 gold I'd spent on troops, I received 300,000 Norans gold coins as my share of cream sales from the Far East Trading Company. Demand from nobles was slowing down, but Vis wrote to me saying he was preparing to sell cream in Yad and Rima. If that worked out, my income would multiply several times over. 300,000 sounded like a lot, but I knew it wasn't enough. Real warfare meant fighting against mages, and I needed to buy anti-magic materials for Biglin to forge into protective gear. While I was busy with all this, my butler delivered a letter from King Ziluk XIII. The butler handed the letter to Reyna. I was busy dealing with territory matters. The new Luica domain was bigger and richer than the old one, but that meant way more paperwork. Reyna had gotten into the habit of hanging around me whenever she wasn't training, and Elialu was generous enough to share her time with me. "Read it to me," I said without looking up, figuring it was probably just my Earl promotion finally coming through. Reyna opened the royal seal and started reading, but then she went silent. I looked up and saw her arms trembling, her eyes full of fear and hurt like a frightened deer. I took the letter from her. After some empty flattery and praise for Reyna, the king got straight to the point. He was asking how much gold or what title I wanted in exchange for handing Reyna over to the royal family. Now I understood why she looked like that. She was terrified I'd sell her. "Master, Reyna will get even stronger. Please let me stay by your side." Her tail drooped. She understood perfectly what this letter meant. The most powerful man in Norans wanted her. Even if I refused, my career as a noble would be over. The king wouldn't even need to act directly. One signal from him, and every noble who'd been friendly to me would start shutting me out. My reputation, my title, everything could crumble in an instant. And if I did hand her over, there was no guarantee Ziluk would keep any promises. He might take Reyna and give me nothing. It was a trap with no right answer. Rebellion was suicide, My 5,000 guards against the royal army of 200,000, plus over 1,000,000 soldiers from all the noble houses combined. Reyna, do you want to go to the capital? I asked, even though I already knew her loyalty was absolute. She shook her head so fast it looked like a rattle drum. Don't worry, I won't give you to anyone. As long as you want to stay in Luika, it will always be your home. I took her warm little hand. She trusted me completely, blindly, even. I was the one who gave her everything when she had nothing. She told herself that if she ever had to leave me and serve someone else, she'd rather die. I didn't write back. Instead, I took Reyna and left for the capital that same night. My only hope was Arya. She had the status and power that even King Zeluk wouldn't dare challenge lightly. My one worry was whether she'd actually help me. Maybe for Saruka's sake, maybe not. The Magic Academy was huge, set in a busy part of the city. After a brief exchange with the guards at the gate, they told me to wait. Reyna wore an oversized cloak to hide her identity. The White Enchantress was too famous now. Soon a guard returned and led us to a pavilion inside the grounds. Before long, Saruka came running toward me, her little cat tail swinging back and forth. She hadn't gotten to talk to me at the tournament and was clearly making up for it now, nuzzling against me until she'd had her fill. Master, my teacher will be here soon. I ran over as soon as I heard. She'd actually skipped class to come see me. I patted her head. Have you been taking care of yourself? She nodded, then looked at the cloaked figure behind me. I told Reyna to take off the cloak. The two girls sized each other up. Reyna felt a twinge of insecurity. Saruka was pretty, she was a cat girl, and catfolk were much more popular with humans than dragon types. Plus, Saruka also called me Master. Reyna could already guess their relationship, and it stung a little. But Saruka was genuinely excited. I know you. You're the White Enchantress who won glory for our master. You're so amazing. I wish I could stand by his side openly like you do. Her admiration seemed real. She'd changed a little since coming to the capital, less timid, more lively. Or maybe she was only like that around me. They warmed up to each other fast. When Saruka heard what the king wanted, she was furious on my behalf. Then Arya's voice cut in from behind us. So this is why you came to see me. Arya appeared out of nowhere, which caught me off guard. This legendary grand mage who rarely showed herself in public was studying me with a careful gaze. She was the one who'd vouched for Reyna at the tournament when people accused her of using magic. Good day, Duchess Arya, I said. She waved that off. Don't call me Duchess. Call me Dean. Saruka is my favorite student. We don't need to be so formal. She reached over and touched Saruka's cat ears, making her jump away. Saruka's ears and tail were sensitive spots. She only let me touch them without flinching. Arya sat down, her snow-white hair drifting in the breeze. It wasn't white from age. White elves were born with white hair, and the purer the blood, the whiter it was. Even after hundreds of years, her beauty hadn't faded at all. If she weren't so powerful, countless nobles would have tried to claim her. Dean Arya, is there any way to make the king change his mind? I asked. She shook her head and looked at Reyna instead. She is quite beautiful. Very concentrated white dragon blood. No wonder that boy Zeluk is interested. Then she spread her hands. I'm only an honorary duchess. I can't override the king's wishes. Either hand the little dragon girl over, or end your noble career. You're a smart man. Do I really need to help you weigh the options? My heart sank even though I'd expected this. I couldn't give up Reyna. Setting aside her talent. If I handed her over today, what happens when the king finds out about Saruka and demands her too? Would I give up Saruka as well? Would anyone ever trust me enough to serve me again? I'll fight this to the end, I said, even if it means opposing the king. He can't just take people's freedom like this. I bought Reyna from a slave trader, but I removed her slave collar long ago. She's not a slave. She's family. Humans or subhumans. Everyone deserves the right to live free. I will protect Reyna, even against the king. Arya smiled. A smile so beautiful it made the garden flowers look dull. So you'd throw away your future and risk the lives of everyone in your territory, all for one person? This is a world where the strong eat the weak, I said calmly. I'll lead my people to fight. We won't necessarily lose. She shook her head. No matter what I chose, it was wrong. Then she called Reyna over. Little white dragon, come here. Reyna looked at me warily. I nodded. She walked over, and Arya placed her pale hand on Reyna's head. A strange light flashed. Reyna's dragon horns shrank and vanished, leaving a smooth forehead. Her scales disappeared completely. Even her face changed. She looked like an ordinary human girl. I checked her status. A new line had appeared under her talents. Bloodline hidden. There, Arya said. Keep her out of the noble's sight from now on. This spell will last at least 10 years. When it's wearing off, bring her back to me. Tell Zeluk the dragon girl ran away, and invite him to send people to help search your territory. You know how to play these noble games. I shouldn't need to teach you. She picked up her tea and took a sip. Also, your cream is quite good. I like it. I could barely contain my relief. I bowed deeply. Thank you, Denaria. I will never forget this kindness. I didn't do it for you, she said casually. I just didn't want to see my cute student crying. Saruka pouted. Teacher, I don't cry. Really? I remember when you first came to the academy. You used to hide under your blankets crying every night because you missed home. Saruka's face went red. How did you know about that? Who knows? Maybe the god of light whispered it to me. I said goodbye to Saruka, who didn't want me to leave. She still hadn't reached the level of magic master, so she had to stay and keep studying under Arya. On the carriage ride home, Reyna clung to my sleeve the whole way. Once we were inside, she finally spoke. I'm sorry, master. Reyna caused you trouble. She was so insecure. Even knowing I wouldn't hand her over, she couldn't stop being afraid. How is this your fault? I said gently. I'm the one who made you enter the tournament. If anyone's to blame, it's me. You did wonderfully, Reyna. She shook her head. Master never makes mistakes. If Reyna were strong enough, no one would dare threaten you. I didn't say anything more. I looked out the carriage window at the passing landscape. She was right. I needed to become stronger. This was a world where the strong devour the weak. There was no reasoning with it. What? Lin Wei says the white enchantress ran away? That must have been Zeluk's reaction when my messenger delivered the news. His first thought, of course, wasn't that Reyna actually escaped. He assumed I was refusing to hand her over. But when my messenger added that I was asking for the king's help to search for her, even offering to present her if caught, that threw him off. Was I telling the truth, or was I so confident she'd never be found? Zeluk sent Gaedlin as his envoy along with 1,000 royal guards to conduct a carpet search of Luika territory. Since Gaedlin was a dragon-blooded warrior, he could sense other dragon bloodlines. The king figured that between Gaedlin's senses and 1,000 soldiers, not even a fly could hide in my lands. But I planned for this. Reyna now looked completely human thanks to Arya's magic. Her blood was hidden, her face was different, even her name was changed to Aishishi. Gaedlin could walk right past her and feel nothing. The nobles had their own theories about why the king sent soldiers to my territory. Some said I'd angered the king and was being watched. Others thought the king favored me and was lending troops to guard my land. As long as neither Zeluk nor I talked, the truth would stay hidden. Neither of us had any reason to. This whole affair was embarrassing for both sides. Before the royal guards arrived, I moved 3,000 of my soldiers to Old Luika territory. Partly because the old territory's defenses were weak, Norrell and fewer than 500 guards couldn't hold it alone. But also because I didn't want the king to see how strong my military had become. I sent 1,000 heavy cavalry and 2,000 infantry there, keeping 2,000 as my home guard. Once this blew over and Zeluk stopped obsessing about Reyna, I'd recruit more soldiers. Only when I was strong enough could I prevent something like this from happening again. Meanwhile, Michel, the third prince, had been quietly investigating. He'd tracked Saruka's carriage movements, confirming it had entered Luika territory before returning to the capital. Combined with the mysterious disappearance of my dragon girl, he was starting to connect dots. He thought I was weak, just a freshly promoted viscount who'd gotten lucky capturing 2 Rima royals. He didn't believe I'd built my forces with just 1,000 gold coins from selling that eagle badge. He figured my grandfather Edward, the former sword saint, must have left me a fortune. But Michel wasn't going to act yet. He wasn't sure what my relationship with Saruka really was, and his father was already keeping eyes on my territory. More importantly, Michel had just gotten permission to inherit Blackstone Fortress, and he was planning something huge, opening the gates to let the Beastmen invade Norans. The Beast folk hadn't invaded in years, and every time they did, they swept through the border before being stopped at Blackstone Fortress. But next year would be different. Michel planned to lower the drawbridge and welcome them in. Norans was about to face a massive upheaval. When the royal envoys arrived at my territory, I greeted them personally with Reyna and Elyalou at my side. The lead envoy was a commoner viscount named Connor, along with Gaedlin. Connor introduced himself politely, and I smiled and welcomed him warmly. I'll treat you to the finest cream bread we have. And once we catch that traitor Reyna, please put in a good word for me with His Majesty. As I said this, I slipped a heavy bag of gold coins into his hand. The jingling sound and the weight made his eyes light up instantly. Well then, I'll gladly accept your generous hospitality. He pocketed the gold without a second thought. The king had sent him to find the White Enchantress, but whether the search was thorough or not was really up to him. As long as Gaedlin didn't sense anything, this assignment could wrap up quickly. He'd barely arrived and already made a fortune. Suddenly my face looked very handsome to him. Getting things done in this world isn't just about fists. You need to know how to play the game. Connor spent the whole week doing absolutely nothing after I paid him off. 2,000 Norans gold coins was a fortune for a commoner viscount with no territory and no taxes. He ate, slept, and occasionally showed his face in front of Gaedlin just to pretend he was working. The royal guards searched without rest, but they'd never find Reyna. She was right under their noses the whole time, transformed into a human girl named Aishishi, staying by my side every day. Even her training was put on hold until this blew over. She didn't seem to mind. She said just being near me made her heart beat faster, like she was getting stronger somehow. Gaedlin was losing hope too. When he first arrived, the white dragon's scent had been strong, but it faded more each day. After a heavy rain, the smell vanished completely. He started thinking Reyna had truly fled Luika territory, or that I'd smuggled her out. Either way, he couldn't find her. It frustrated him. He'd actually been planning to ask the king to give Reyna to him as a reward after finding her, hoping to mate with her and produce powerful offspring. But now that was all just a fantasy. When it was time to leave, Connor smiled at me like we were old friends. Viscount Linway, sorry for the trouble these past weeks. He'd been pampered the entire time. Good food, maid service, a life this commoner noble had never experienced before. I handed him another bag of gold coins as a parting gift. His eyes squeezed into happy slits. Don't worry, Viscount, he said. I'll tell His Majesty you've been loyal, hard-working, and had nothing to do with the White Enchantress. I'm sure she crossed the Rima River long ago and fled to the Naz tribal lands. I sighed and thanked him. The handoff was so smooth that Gaedlin standing behind us didn't notice a thing. Connor's hands were impossibly fast when gold was involved. The royal guards had been grumbling the whole time, too. I deliberately fed them nothing but hard black bread, while my own soldiers ate wheat cakes with salted potato soup and occasional meat right in front of them. Even royal guards only got bran cakes back home. My regular troops ate better than the king's men. They couldn't help but notice my soldiers' iron armor and quality weapons either. If they'd seen the heavy cavalry I'd moved to Old Luika, they'd have been truly shocked. Master, why did you give that noble so much gold? Reyna asked afterward. I patted her head. The big demons are easy to deal with. It's the little ones that cause trouble. 2,000 coins is nothing for us now, but buying Connor's good. Words keeps attention away from Luika territory, so we can develop in peace. She thought about it quietly, then said, Master, thank you for everything you've done for Reyna. I shook my head. I should be thanking all of you. Without you, there'd be no Luika territory and no me. That morning, Bidey came to see me. She sat beside me silently, watching me work through the whole morning without saying a word. I'd already noticed her stats had returned to normal. Combat, 223, Strategy, 482, Favorability, 35, with talents including Dragon Tamer, Dragon Slayer Hero, Empress, and Transmigrator. SS Plus Evaluation. Those numbers were absolutely ridiculous. When I finished my last task, I looked at her. You're leaving? She wasn't surprised I knew. She nodded and pulled out a white pendant from her clothes, a tiny, lifelike dragon carving that radiated a strange warmth. A parting gift, she said, to thank you for taking care of me. I put it on without refusing. She smiled when she saw me wearing it. I think we'll meet again. She stood, walked to the door, and gave me a small wave. I didn't say anything. I just watched her disappear from sight. After Connor and his men left, I got back to recruiting soldiers. In less than 2 months, The cream business had earned me over 1 million Noran's gold coins through the Far East Trading Company, a fortune that would impress even a duke. I used it to expand my guard to 10,000, including 1,000 heavy cavalry. Combined with the 3,000 I'd sent to Old Luica, my forces were getting serious. No standout talents among the new recruits, unfortunately, but at least I had Action and Ankro to lead them. Summer hit hard. The heat was brutal, warping the air itself. I could barely focus on paperwork, and without a trusted administrator, everything piled on me. The pendant Baidi gave me seemed to keep my mind sharp. Without it, I might have collapsed under the workload. "Young master, have some iced tea," Elialu said one day, setting a glass in front of me. I stared at it. Ice? In the middle of summer? Turns out Reyna had touched the well water, and it froze solid. Nobody knew why, but the temperature around her kept dropping. I went to check on her, and found the estate's small lake completely frozen over in the dead of summer. Her combat rating had grown to 168, and her Frost Dragon inheritance was now actively working. When she opened her eyes in the lake, her pupils had gone vertical like a dragon's, her red irises deeper than ever. But in a moment it all faded back to her human disguise. Aria's spell was still holding. She ran over to me, excited. I patted her head. It was warm, not icy like I'd expected. "Just came to check on you," I said. Her face flushed red. Too bad the magic hit her tail. I couldn't see it wagging. Meanwhile, all of Noran's was in a frenzy. The land that Rima had surrendered as war compensation was being divided up. King Zeluk claimed the richest area, a large former Rima town, as his personal territory. The dukes carved up the good land around it, with Duke Simon getting the best piece after the king's. Massive numbers of citizens and craftsmen were forced to relocate to build new towns. 15,000 royal guards were deployed to protect the settlers and clear out bandits and beasts. Zeluk had originally planned to send fewer troops, but since Michel had taken over Blackstone Fortress with its 50,000 garrison, the king felt he could spare more. He sent 150,000, leaving only 50,000 guards and a few thousand griffin riders in the capital. Every noble from dukes down to barons stripped their own territories of soldiers to join the land grab. Every noble except me. Zeluk deliberately excluded me from the feast. He still didn't believe Reyna had really escaped, and Connor's glowing report about me had only made the king more suspicious. So I got nothing, not a single scrap of new land. Honestly, I didn't care. That land was tempting, but I didn't have the energy or resources to develop a third territory. Pioneering new land cost more than people realized, and the returns came slowly. Better to focus on what I had and build up both Luica territories. Feder was having second thoughts. He realized he'd let a golden son-in-law slip away when he rejected me. But after the royal guards left my territory, I seemed to fall out of favor overnight. Rumors about me dried up, and I got nothing from the land division, not even a scrap. Everyone knew those lands were won because I captured 2 Rima royals. Yet even Fedra got a piece of forest while I got 0. He figured I must have done something to anger the king. He told his daughter Lena to forget about me and start getting close to Viscount Wanhao instead, a greasy 40-something with a reputation for a messy private life. Lena's eyes dimmed. Her father had always treated her as a tool, never as a daughter. At least I had been her childhood friend with some real feelings between us. Being pushed toward that man was like being thrown into a pit. Something in her eyes shifted, like she'd finally seen through her father. If this family never treated her as family, why should she stay? Meanwhile, I was investing heavily in building a magic core. I spent tens of thousands of gold buying every basic magic textbook available, plus advanced theory books. Everyone has different magical affinity. Some are good with fire but hopeless with water. Some can handle multiple elements but have low magic reserves. Finding another genius like Saruka was nearly impossible, so I needed to test everyone. Narancel watched as my guards carried stack after stack of magic books into his room, along with 100 practice staffs and 10 beginner magic staffs. I'd assigned 20 talented citizens to train under him. His stats had improved since joining me. Strategy up to 109, loyalty risen from 80 to 90. I still didn't fully understand what made him so loyal to me, but high loyalty meant I could trust him with important work. I patted his shoulder and promised to find him powerful spellbooks to help him on his path to becoming a magic master. His elf ears twitched with excitement. That had always been his life's dream. Honestly, I'd learned the art of making promises from my bosses back on Earth. But seeing how earnest Narancel was, I figured I should actually try to deliver on this one. I also started planning something most nobles considered pointless: archers. In this world, special units were the strongest, followed by heavy cavalry charges, then fully armored infantry. Archers were only useful against lightly armored troops. Against heavy armor, arrows were almost worthless. Training archers was expensive too. You needed men with exceptional arm strength, plus refined iron for arrowheads, or even magically enchanted ones. Refined iron was a luxury, purer than what regular chainmail was made from. That's why almost nobody except the royal army bothered with archers. Even on castle walls, people preferred crossbow turrets and burning oil. But I thought differently. I was already building a magic core, so why not try archers too? Anything that could strengthen my forces was worth attempting. If there was one thing I had more of than other nobles, it was gold. I split off 1,000 of my 10,000 trainees to form an archer unit. Most of them had been hunters before joining up, so they already knew how to shoot. In Norans, a hunter without aim starves to death in winter, so they barely needed training to hit targets. I also wrote to Norrell asking him to recruit some blacksmiths to help Biglin, since one man alone couldn't keep up with all the equipment we needed. Most of the best smiths came from the dwarf race, short, stocky people obsessed with forging and strong liquor. Unfortunately, none had shown up recently. What I really needed was a competent administrator. Managing 2 territories alone was killing me. I decided to visit the slave trader again. People who'd lost their freedom were the most eager to earn it back, which made them easier to manage, especially for sensitive positions. The fat merchant spotted me from across the street and came running. "Lord Linway, what brings you here? Please, come in." He called me Lord instead of Viscount to sound friendlier. I asked if he had anything new. No rare subhumans, but I just got my hands on some white elves. Took a lot of effort to acquire. "Want to take a look?" He gave me a sly grin. Guaranteed original. He led me to a wagon where 5 small elf girls huddled together like frightened fawns. Their hair was white like Aria's, but with a grayish tint, meaning their bloodline wasn't as pure. I checked their stats. Chalice, Combat 4, Strategy 88, with talents in photographic memory, powerful logical thinking, and mastery of ancient languages. Nashia, Combat 7, Strategy 79, with talent in alchemy expertise. The other 3 had strategy around 40, decent enough to train as maids. 2 of them had genuinely impressive intellect stats. This was a great find. How much? 10,000 gold each. But buy all 5 and I'll give them to you for 40,000. Done. I'll send someone with the gold. Back at the manor, Elialu and Reyna were waiting. They stared at the 5 little elves, then back at me. "Master, is this?" Elialu started. "Are Elialu and Reyna not good enough anymore?" Reyna didn't say anything, but the temperature around her seemed to drop a few degrees. "Master, are you finally going after these poor children?" Elialu said with an exaggerated sad face, as if wondering why her C+ rating couldn't compete with these undeveloped little girls. I was completely speechless. "Elialu, what kind of person do you think I am? I'm only 17. I just couldn't bear to see them suffering out there. I wanted to give them a home. Is that wrong?" Reyna and Elialu both paused, thought about it, and slowly nodded. It did make sense, they agreed. Looking at how easily I'd convinced them, I wondered if their strategy stats were a joke. Maybe my own strategy was actually way higher than 73? "Master truly is a saint," Elialu chirped. "Your heart is as merciful as the god of light himself." I ignored the flattery and gave my orders. "These 5 will train under you too, and the head, made to learn proper maid etiquette. Feed them the same standard as the other maids." "Yes, young master," Elialu answered brightly. After I left, the 5 little elves finally relaxed. In their experience, only men looked at them with greedy eyes. These 2 pretty older sisters seemed safe enough. Poor little Chalice was getting her ears rubbed by Elialu, who seemed to really enjoy teasing the elf girls. Chalice's face turned bright red and her pointed ears got hot before Elialu finally let go, leaving the little elf collapsed on the floor, looking completely defeated. The 5 elves had been fitted with custom-made outfits already. Chalice had thought the older sisters would be nice. Turns out she was wrong about that. Reyna wasn't joining in the teasing, though. She was counting on her fingers with a complicated expression. When Elialu asked what she was calculating, Rhaenys said, I'm figuring out how many days are in a week. If everyone gets 1 day, the master's harem keeps growing. I need to secure at least 1 day for myself. Elialu wasn't quite sure what to make of that. I decided to let the 5 elves settle in before assigning them roles based on their talents. My top priority was getting a political administrator. Without one, paperwork was eating my entire life. Chalice's photographic memory, logical mind, and ancient language skills made her perfect for that job. Nashia's alchemy talent was even more exciting. On this continent, a master alchemist could have status rivaling a magic master. Some could create terrifying alchemical creatures with destructive power beyond even a grand mage, while others brewed potions that gave ordinary people the strength of a giant bear, though with serious side effects. Unfortunately, alchemy wasn't well developed in Norans or Rima. Only the Yad Kingdom had real expertise, and they hated outsiders, especially Noran's nobles. We raided their borders every year, so they despised us. Until I found a way to get alchemy books, that plan would have to wait. The cream business was booming, but it stung knowing half my profits went to the Far East Trading Company. I needed to start my own merchant operation eventually, but I didn't have anyone trustworthy to run it yet. With summer half over, I needed to stockpile grain for winter. Last year's overhunting had thinned out the forest game considerably. I took several hundred guards and rode to the Far East Trading Company. The roads felt strangely empty. Most young men had been pulled away for the Great Land Rush, leaving territories weakly defended. Something about the emptiness felt wrong. Vis was surprised to see me. Viscount Linway, shouldn't you be busy developing your new land? He didn't know the king had cut me out. As a commoner noble busy running the trading company, he had no way of hearing such things. Everyone who knew was keeping quiet. I've been pretty free lately, I said casually. Do you have enough wheat to sell? He did. 100 cartloads at 1,000 gold coins each. Some was last year's stock, but he was honest about that. Each cart held about 10 tons. Combined with what I already had stored, this should get us through winter easily. I told him to deduct it from next month's cream profits. One more thing. Do you have any connections for alchemy supplies? He shook his head. He'd come across some before, but never bought them because they didn't sell well in Norans. He promised to keep an eye out for me. As I looked out at the quiet streets of the kingdom, most of its strength drained away for the land grab. A bad feeling settled in my gut. Something wasn't right. Far away, Bidey had returned to her kingdom and dealt with the traitors swiftly. Rows of rebel succubus heads lined the cold steps of her throne room. With her curse lifted and her frost dragon and loyal guards at her side, she crushed the rebellion easily. These fools had only succeeded in the first place because she'd been hit by a grand mage's curse while her frost dragon was hibernating. Now she sat on her frozen throne, the untouchable succubus empress once more. But strangely, she found herself missing the quiet days she'd spent in Luica territory. Autumn arrived. I stood looking at my forces with real pride. 10,000 soldiers total, 8,000 fully armored guards, 1,000 archers, and 1,000 heavy cavalry. The archers used special refined iron arrowheads forged by Bigland's team, strong enough to punch through iron shields with enough force behind them. 50 heavy crossbows sat on the city walls, along with plenty of rolling logs, stones, and other siege defense materials. I'd even built small watchtower outposts along the Rima River, manned around the clock in shifts. If anything moved on the other side, signal fires would go up and scouts would bring word back immediately. Traders said the Naz beast tribes across the river had been fighting over their beast king throne for decades and hadn't attacked Norans in years. But I didn't fully trust that intelligence. I hadn't seen their civil war with my own eyes. I wasn't going to be like the old Count St. Martin who'd hoped the beast folk would simply be merciful. Those savage races showed no mercy. If they broke through, everything, women, men, property, would become their spoils. My territory sat right along the Rima River on one of the main roads to the capital. If the beast folk ever crossed, they'd come through here first because our roads were the widest. While I was considering whether to add more giant crossbows before winter, Akshin jogged over to me. He and Ankro had been working hard, keeping the army trained even without Noril around. His face had gotten dark from the sun, and he'd grown a bit taller, maybe from the better food. Sir, I haven't seen Bidey lately. What's she been up to? His eyes shifted nervously when he said her name. I understood immediately. The boy had feelings for her. I put my hand on his shoulder and pointed toward the roaring Rima River beyond the walls. Akshin, do you see that river? On the other side are countless opportunities for glory. Someday those beast folk might cross over and threaten our land and our families. You need to become stronger, strong enough to protect everyone. Earn enough glory and gold, and you'll be able to win the woman you love. His eyes lit up with burning determination. Sir, I understand. He bowed deeply and walked away, no longer asking where Bidi had gone. He knew he had to become stronger first, become a knight, maybe even a commoner noble. Then he'd have the courage to confess his feelings. I watched him go and sighed quietly. Even if Akshin became strong enough, a knight, or even a noble, Bidi was a succubus empress with a combat rating of 223 and a strategy of 482. She'd never look at him that way. But that answer was too cruel for such an honest, earnest kid. Sometimes a beautiful dream is what drives people forward. Winter came early this year. It was still late autumn, but sleet was already falling, and the cold bit through everything. I pulled my coat tighter and watched the servants and maids still working through the weather, cleaning the castle, trimming the gardens. I sighed, my breath making little white clouds. I'd thought about training with the knights to build up my strength, but the lazy part of me always won. I was a shut-in before I transmigrated, and my father Ryan never liked fighting either, so I never inherited grandfather Edward's combat skills. I told myself that as long as my soldiers were strong enough, they'd protect everything. And honestly, under my leadership, life in the territory really had gotten better. I'd cut taxes by half compared to the old Count St. Martin's time and created tons of jobs, feeding horses, cooking for soldiers, maintaining weapons. A few silver coins might not sound like much, but a big loaf of black bread only cost 1 copper. My soldiers got 3 silver coins a month in pay, enough to treat themselves to rabbit meat and drinks at the tavern sometimes. I could have eliminated taxes entirely. 100 gold coins meant nothing to me. But I didn't want people to take the good life for granted. I kept things comfortable but controlled, always maintaining that line. Give enough kindness, build a reputation for bravery and generosity, and when the time comes to make hard choices, the people will follow you. That's exactly what I needed. Master, today's paperwork is all done. Little Shalai stood behind me, her soft voice shy and sweet. I patted her head and watched her pointed ears tremble slightly. She clearly enjoyed it. She'd been handling my administrative work for a month now, and she was genuinely brilliant. Fast, efficient, sometimes coming up with better solutions than I could. She was born for this job. If her status panel had said, royalty, I'd have believed she was some fallen elf princess. Her loyalty had jumped to 90. It hit 80 shortly after she settled into life here, and appointing her as my administrator pushed it even higher. The 5 elf girls hadn't expected me to treat them so well. Food, care, actual kindness. They'd thought slavery meant endless darkness. I still hadn't removed their slave collars yet. Not for any weird reason, just because the timing wasn't right. I could hear soldiers drilling in the manor grounds and children playing in the new square outside. Looking at this peaceful scene, I just hoped it would last. Meanwhile, at the Magic Academy, Saruka had done something incredible. She gathered magic into her staff and unleashed a fireball the size of 1/10 of Arya's entire garden. It slammed into a boulder and obliterated it completely. Arya casually flicked her wand to contain the blast, then sipped her tea. Well done, Saruka. That small praise made Saruka beam. She hugged Arya's arm happily. Teacher, I finally became a magic master. Arya smiled. I never expected that love would be such a powerful motivator. Saruka teased back. Teacher, you had plenty of admirers before. Why didn't you ever fall for anyone? Arya bonked her on the head, harder than usual. Back in her youth, she'd found magic far more interesting than men. By the time she was powerful enough, all men seemed boring. She'd been single ever since. But that didn't mean a little cat girl got to make fun of her for it. Winter's coming, Arya said. Do you want to stay at the academy or go back to your little Viscount? Saruka hugged Arya's shoulders. I want to stay with you a bit longer, teacher. Now that she'd reached Magic Master, she could return to me anytime. She wanted to spend this winter studying more. If she'd made it to Magic Master, why not aim for Grand Mage? At least you have some conscience, Arya said. This winter, I threw a big bonfire party for my soldiers. Roasted turkey, wild boar, beef, lamb, soft white bread, and plenty of cream. I stood on a wooden crate and looked out at all of them gathered together. I'm sure you're wondering why I prepared all this food. Well, today is the festival of the goddess of light. After a short speech, I raised my cup. To Norans. To Luika, they raised their bowls of fresh fruit wine and dug in. This was a feast most of them could never afford, even at a tavern, and I was giving it to them for free. The soldiers on patrol duty each got 3 extra silver coins instead. The whole thing was a spur-of-the-moment idea. Elula mentioned the holiday that morning, and I figured why not. I had plenty of grain stored up. It was also a way to boost loyalty, and it worked. Even the lowest loyalty scores among my troops were around 50, with the highest at 100, and the party pushed everyone's numbers up. When the time came to fight for Luika, these men wouldn't break easily. The celebration lasted all night. Soldiers danced around the fire, and some brave souls started singing. Ukshin and Ankro competed to see who could drink more fruit wine. I slipped away while they were still having fun. Rest is just as important as training. My father would probably have called this a waste of money, but I had my own way of doing things. Next, I went to check on Narancel and the magic trainees. He bowed respectfully and reported that all 20 apprentices had learned basic magic. 10 specialized in fire, 5 in earth, 3 in water, and 2 were proficient in both fire and water. The apprentices bowed to me. They knew I'd given them the chance to become something respected. Their strategy scores all hovered around 60, and each had a talent for sensing magical energy, which was the basic requirement for becoming a mage. I'd searched the entire territory and only found these 20. Then I visited the smithy. I'd brought Biglin over from Old Luika territory to save on transportation time and risk. Norl and 3,000 soldiers could handle things there just fine. Biglin was completely focused on hammering a shield that glowed blue. It was made with insulation steel, a rare anti-magic material. The ore came from Luika territory itself, a vivid blue mineral I'd been stockpiling for 2 years without finding a use for it. Now it was finally paying off. Biglin's stats had improved from all his steady work. His loyalty was at 100, and he still had his special talents as an inheritor of the Forge of Courage. When he brought down the final hammer strike, the shield was complete. He lifted it up lovingly. It was half as tall as a person and his very first anti-magic creation. He spotted me and nearly jumped. "Sir, I didn't know you were here." I waved it off and asked about the shield. His chest puffed with pride. "Any soldier carrying this shield will be completely immune to attacks from mid-level mages and below. Even a high-level mage's spell, this shield could save their life. It was incredible. Protection against arrows, blades, and magic all in one. Mages have limited magic reserves, and once their spells bounce off these shields, they're helpless. No heavy armor, no physical strength. Without magic, they're weaker than ordinary soldiers. How many can you make this winter?" I asked. "If there's enough insulation steel, about 1,000. I patted his shoulder. "Good work. 2 silver coins per shield as a bonus." His eyes lit up. Life in Luika territory had been good to him. Steady work, food, fruit wine. His only complaint was the lack of female dwarves. The human women here were all too tall for his taste. Don't ask, it's a height thing. One quiet morning after the snow had melted, smoke signals rose from the watchtowers along the Rima River. I jumped out of bed. Eliulu helped me dress quickly. A scout was already kneeling, waiting for me. "Sir, the beast folk are attacking. They've launched large canoes onto the river, pulled by water rhinos, and they're crossing right now." The Rima River was supposed to be a natural barrier, fast currents and man-eating fish. But the beast folk had tamed enormous water rhinos with skins so thick that nothing could bite through. Those beasts dragged their oversized canoes right across. "How many?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Too many to count, sir. They're everywhere." I summoned Akshin and Ankro immediately. Without Norl here, they were my best commanders. They arrived in full armor, faces grim. They'd seen the smoke signals too. "Akshin, take the 1,000 heavy cavalry and hit the beast men before they can set up on shore. 1 charge, then pull back immediately." "Yes, sir." "Ankro, take 5,000 soldiers into the forest. Set traps, dig trenches, and place barricades in front of the walls." "Yes, sir." I climbed the walls myself. A noble on the front line boosts morale. and I needed to see the battlefield to give orders. In the distance, the usually yellow Rima River was swarming with beastmen landing on the banks. They carried huge shields and curved blades. There were thousands already, and more coming. The beastman commander was called Monliad. He'd made a deal with Michel. The third prince had inherited Blackstone Fortress and planned to open the gates from the inside when the Beastfolk army arrived. They'd gotten intelligence from Yad and Rima that only 50,000 royal guards remained in the capital. Monliad had jumped the timeline, attacking right after winter instead of waiting until April. He figured they'd blast through to the capital before anyone could react. Of course, he had no intention of actually making Michel king. That fool genuinely believed 20,000 beastmen were his friends. The beastfolk planned to take Norans for themselves. But Monliad hadn't planned on us. He heard the thunder of hooves before he saw anything. The ground shook as 1,000 heavy cavalry charged toward his landing zone. His dog-headed soldiers had barely set foot on solid ground. Spear formation. Shields up, he screamed, but it was too late. They couldn't even get their anti-cavalry spears into position before Action's riders crashed into them like tigers into a flock of sheep. The slaughter was over in moments. Thousands of dog-headed beastmen were cut down without killing a single rider. Akshin pulled back to the city walls immediately, exactly as I'd ordered. One strike, then retreat. No getting greedy. Monliad wiped cold sweat from his forehead. His first thought was that Michel had betrayed them. But no, the intelligence was real. Most of Noran's forces were indeed on the Rima side, dealing with the new territories. So where did these elite heavy cavalry come from? Their gear was incredible, blue glowing shields that looked like magic weapons, high-quality swords. Equipment like that should only exist in Zeluk's personal guard. He noticed the empty watchtowers along the shore, smoke still rising. Those outposts had spotted his forces early, giving us time to strike. Whoever was commanding this defense was experienced and bold. Sending just 1,000 cavalry against 200,000 beastmen took serious nerve. Since when did that fat Count St. Martin hire such a skilled knight? Monliad spat on the ground. Wait. Could that old man even afford this many heavy cavalry? And watchtowers with smoke signals. He had no idea the old count was long gone. This territory belonged to me now. High Priest Monliad, is your intelligence wrong? A massive dog-headed beast man over 2 meters tall, carrying a huge axe, glared at Monliad. His name was Nethers, and he wasn't happy about the dead soldiers scattered across the riverbank. Monliad snapped back that his intelligence was fine and pointed at the watchtowers and smoke signals. General Nethers, brute strength alone doesn't make a good commander. The Lord of St. Martin Fortress spotted us before we even landed. He was now certain the fortress had a new lord. The old fat Count St. Martin would never have been smart enough to build watchtowers or give a knight that much authority. The forest ahead probably had traps waiting too. About 50,000 beastmen had landed so far, with another 150,000 still crossing. Monliad ordered 1,000 dog-headed soldiers to scout ahead with wolf riders backing them up, and sent scouts around my fortress to check the neighboring Lancer fortress as an alternate route. If my defenses were too strong, they'd go around. It would cost an extra day, but they needed to reach Blackstone Fortress while the element of surprise held. Nethers laughed at Monliad's caution. I don't believe any little forest has traps that can stop beastfolk warriors. He jumped onto a giant wolf, raised his axe, and roared, "Warriors! The humans' land is right ahead. Charge in and take their women." Thousands of wolf riders howled and thundered toward the forest. I watched from the walls as the wolf cavalry charged in. These giant wolves wore partial iron armor and could burst faster than horses over short distances, though they tired quickly. But the wolves were just an appetizer. The real army stretched across the horizon behind them. We'd set traps in the forest, but there hadn't been enough time to make them truly devastating. Below the walls, Ankro had arranged 5,000 guards in shield formation with barricades in front. We were short on spears. Only the front few hundred soldiers had them. The rest carried Bigland's longswords. I held back the 50 heavy crossbows. Their bolts were limited, and I needed to save them for high-value targets. Archers ready. My 1,000 archers with their refined iron arrowheads lined up along the walls. The wolves had armor on their vital spots, but most of their bodies were exposed. These arrows would hit hard. The forest traps triggered. Wolf howls echoed through the trees, but they barely slowed the charge. Soon the first wave of wolf riders burst into view. My guards below the walls gripped their weapons, faces hard. If this wall fell, the beastmen would slaughter every man and take every woman. When the wolf riders entered range, I swung my arm down. Fire! 1,000 bows released at once, arcing through the sky. The refined iron arrowheads tore into the riders. Hundreds dropped in the first volley. The few who broke through were cut down by my guards with swords and spears. In moments, the wolf cavalry that had charged in so fiercely lost their nerve and retreated out of range. They never expected a border territory to have archers with refined iron arrowheads. Nethers bared his fangs, his dog eyes burning with fury. In just minutes, he'd lost nearly a third of his wolf riders. His roar echoed through the forest. Monliad, you said this wasn't a trap. Monliad mocked Nethers for charging him blindly, and the hot-tempered general nearly swung his axe at the priest before remembering he was a magic master. Nethers demanded to know why the human army had been ready for them if this was supposed to be a surprise attack. Monliad didn't explain, he just studied my defenses. Reinforced walls, thousands of archers, thousands of armored guards below with barricades and trenches, plus heavy cavalry waiting inside. This was clearly a tough nut to crack. He ordered the giant shield soldiers forward, huge iron shields carried by groups of 2 or 3 dog-headed beastmen, forming slow-moving formations. Behind the shields, they hid battering rams. If those rams reached our gates while my guards were tied up fighting below, the wolf riders would charge in again. I saw the problem immediately. My arrows couldn't pierce those massive iron shields, and the rams were getting closer. "Sir, let me take the cavalry and break their formation." Akshin stepped up. He was right. Only heavy cavalry could scatter those shield walls and stop the rams. "Go," I said. For the glory of Luika. This charge would be nothing like the first one. Those beastmen were ready with spears and curved blades behind their shields. There would be real losses this time. We fought all day, morning to afternoon. The cavalry charged again and again, smashing into the shield formations and keeping the rams from reaching our walls. Several times they almost broke through, but we held. By the end of the day, I'd lost half my heavy cavalry. The survivors were all wounded. Thousands of my elite guards lay dead below the walls. We'd killed about 5,000 beastmen, an incredible exchange rate, but their numbers were overwhelming. Tens of thousands more waited beyond the forest, with another 150,000 still crossing the river. The smell of iron and blood hung over all of Luika. Soldiers groaning in pain. Civilians crying. Just days ago, these same men had been dancing around the bonfire, laughing and singing. Now so many of them were cold corpses. It hit me like a hammer. War was more cruel than I'd ever imagined. But I hardened my eyes. Sacrifice was unavoidable. I was a noble, and nobles had a duty to protect their lands. I'd sent a scout named ISU racing to the capital with an urgent message. He rode so hard his horse died on the way, reaching the city by evening. But the palace guards turned him away. The king wasn't available. Come back in a few days. They didn't tell ISU that the king was deliberately ignoring anything from me. ISU had no idea about the grudge between Zeluk and me. He stood at the gates, desperate, until Count Pharaohs noticed the Luika family crest on his uniform. Pharaohs had just returned from the new territories to grab supplies. When ISU told him beastmen were attacking Luika in massive numbers, even Pharaohs was shocked. "Go to the Magic Academy," Pharaohs told him. "Tell Duchess Arya. She's the only one who can save Luika." Pharaohs understood the situation. He knew the king would probably be happy to let me die at the hands of the beast folk. Even if Luika fell, Zeluk figured Blackstone Fortress would still hold. Arya was my only hope. ISU made it to Arya without trouble. The little scout was frantic, barely able to get his words out, but he managed to explain Luika's situation clearly enough. Arya's brow furrowed. Saruka, standing nearby, dropped her cup on the floor. Lin Wei was in danger. If the beast folk were invading in force, that meant at least 100,000. Saruka knew me well enough to know I'd fight to the last breath for the hundreds of thousands of civilians behind my walls. She had to get to me. A powerful magic master at my side could make a real difference. She was about to say goodbye to Arya when her teacher stopped her. "Wait." Saruka's eyes were already red. "Teacher, he's in danger. I have to go." Arya shook her head gently. I didn't say you couldn't go. She reached under the table and pulled out a deep red wooden box. Inside was a magic staff and a folded magic cloak. This staff was mine when I was young. The crystal on it stores magic energy. It'll help you conserve and stockpile power. And this cloak gathers ambient magic from the air and speeds up your casting. A magic master can't go without proper equipment. Saruka bowed deeply. Arya was the person who loved her most in this world besides me. Teacher, if I make it back alive. A force sealed her lips before she could finish. Arya smiled. Go. Take my carriage. It's the fastest one at the academy. As Saruka disappeared from view, Arya sipped the tea her student had brewed. It was always perfect when Saruka made it, but now it tasted off somehow. She didn't get involved in Noran's politics, but the fact that my scout had to come here for help told her exactly what kind of choice Zaluk had made. She looked out at the peaceful academy grounds. Noran's was rotting. She'd promised her first student she'd watch over this kingdom's prosperity. She'd broken that promise. Back at Luika, twin blood moons hung in the sky. Torches lined every inch of my walls. The beast folk attacks had finally slowed after Ukshin's cavalry destroyed over 1,000 battering rams through repeated charges. Without rams, the beastmen couldn't threaten the gates, and my guards could finally fall back to the walls where our stockpiled rocks and logs could be put to use. But the cost was devastating. Of my 1,000 heavy cavalry, barely 100 remained, all of them wounded. Some had lost arms or legs. They sat against the walls, bandages soaked red. We had only about 10 priests in all of Luika, all low level, with limited healing magic. They could only treat soldiers with serious but survivable wounds. Fatal injuries were beyond their power. The enemy's mages had attacked during the cavalry charges, but our insulation steel shields held. After that, the mages pulled back, realizing our shields were anti-magic. They stayed hidden where our archers and crossbows couldn't target them. My archers took no losses, but 2,000 guards were dead and another 1,000 wounded. I had about 6,000 fighters left. Against that, we'd killed over 2,000 wolf riders, 5,000 shield soldiers, and destroyed 1,000 rams, nearly 10,000 beastman casualties in one day. An incredible exchange rate, but their numbers were so vast it barely mattered. I didn't know why they were so desperate to break through my territory specifically. At this rate, we couldn't hold more than a few more days. I knew about Blackstone Fortress behind us. Knowing Zaluk, he probably wouldn't send help. But running was not an option. I could escape to my old barony, sure, but the hundreds of thousands of civilians in New Luika had nowhere to go. If I fled, they'd face the beast folks' blades with nothing. As long as there was even a sliver of hope, I would not abandon them. Bodies and broken weapons were piled high outside the walls. Neither side dared clean the battlefield. The smell of blood and iron was everywhere. On the beast folks' side, Nethers was furious at Monliad. Why did your mages only attack once and then disappear? Monliad explained coldly that my cavalry carried anti-magic shields. Continuing magical attacks would just make his mages sitting targets for my archers and crossbows. He was also disturbed that I could equip 1,000 riders with such advanced gear. He suspected I had even stronger cards I hadn't played yet. He'd spent the whole day observing from a distance and noticed that despite killing roughly 3,000 of my men, the wall defenses never seemed to thin out. Without understanding my full strength, he saw no point in continuing blind assaults. Monliad's scouts returned from Lancer Fortress with good news for him. Only 2 crossbows on the walls, no watchtowers, fewer than 2,000 defenders. He decided to take the main army and go around us. Nethers refused to leave. He demanded 20,000 elite iron-armored troops and vowed to break through Luika himself, while Monliad took the rest to Lancer. They argued. Monliad even pointed his staff at Nethers, but in the end, the priest took the bulk of the army and marched away, secretly hoping the brainless general would die here. After Monliad left, Nethers launched his attack immediately. 20,000 iron-armored, dog-headed beastmen with giant shields and ladders, coming straight at my walls. No battering rams this time, just pure brute force with siege ladders. Their howls echoed across the territory. My crossbows fired bolt after bolt, but 50 heavy crossbows couldn't cover every gap. Ladders slammed against the walls everywhere. Ankro told me to get somewhere safe. I refused. My men had been fighting for over 12 hours. If I stood here, they'd fight harder. I couldn't leave. Then we spotted something worse, siege catapults appearing in the distance. If we didn't destroy those, the men on the walls would be slaughtered. Sir, let me go. Ukshin's eyes burned with firelight and fury. The cavalry was down to fewer than 100 riders, all wounded. But if those catapults kept firing, the city would fall even faster. Sir, I'll take the guards and open a path for the cavalry. Ankro volunteered too. I was silent for a long moment. I put my hand on Ukshin's shoulder. Go. For the glory of Luika. He placed his fist on his chest. For the glory of Luika. I knew the chances of him coming back were almost zero. Wounded riders charging through a sea of iron-armored beastmen to reach catapults guarded by even more troops. It was practically a suicide mission. A soft hand grabbed mine. Master, I'll protect you, Reyna said quietly, holding her sword and shield. I said nothing. I just watched. The gates opened. Ankro led thousands of guards into the beastmen surrounding the walls, hacking and slashing to tear open a gap. When the moment came, Ukshin raised his iron sword high. Cavalry, charge! Under covering fire from our archers and crossbows, the riders punched through toward the catapults. Ukshin reached the first one and cut through its ropes and supports in seconds. It collapsed into nothing. But before he could celebrate, beastmen swarmed in from every direction. Without charging momentum, cavalry lost their greatest advantage. There was no way back. His eyes went red. Brothers, fight to the end. One by one the catapults fell. But so did the riders. From hundreds, they were down to barely 30. Then Nethers himself pushed through the crowd like a living battering ram. He slammed into a warhorse so hard the animal went down instantly. He swung his massive axe and cut a fully armored rider clean in half. Armor, flesh, and all. Damn humans, he snarled. You'll pay for this. He locked eyes on Ukshin and charged straight at him, axe raised. Ukshin didn't even see it coming. Nethers charged at him like a living siege engine, swinging that massive axe with enough force to cut a man in half. Ukshin raised his insulation steel shield, but the impact knocked him clean off his horse. He coughed up blood. It felt like a dragon had struck him. His insides were scrambled from just one blow. He gritted his teeth and raised his sword, but Nethers was already on him. A punch to the chest sent him flying. His blade couldn't even scratch Nethers' armor. As the axe came down for the final blow, Ukshin's mind drifted. He remembered the morning he first saw Baidi. He'd tripped during training, and she'd asked if he was okay in that gentle voice of hers. He'd never seen anyone so beautiful. He'd fallen for her instantly. He never got to tell her how he felt properly. He knew she was my property, knew a squad captain had no right to speak of such things. But I'd been kind about it. I'd told him to earn glory and gold, and someday he could stand before her proudly. His vision blurred. The axe grew closer. The sounds of battle faded. He looked one last time at Luika's walls, glowing with firelight. A place he'd never return to. For Luika. Fight. When the last Luika heavy rider disappeared into the swarm of dog-headed soldiers, my eyes burned red. Ukshin had earned enough merit tonight to be knighted. I should have done it before sending him out. I should have knighted him right then and there. The gates closed. The ladder attacks intensified. More beastmen climbed the walls, but my guards threw them back every time. Reyna stood beside me, killing every beastman that got close. Scales crept across her skin, frost spread beneath her feet. She'd become the white enchantress again, an immovable wall at my side. The fighting lasted all night. When a horn finally sounded and the beastmen pulled back, they'd lost over 5,000 more warriors. Without battering rams or catapults, my cavalry had destroyed them all. Ladders alone couldn't take these walls. Nethers was starting to regret not following Monliad to Lancer Fortress. I stood on the walls at dawn, looking out at the exhausted beastmen resting in the distance. In one day and one night, I'd lost 5,000 soldiers. The survivors were battered and wounded. But the beastmen's losses were far worse. Their dead were piled high beneath the walls. My men's equipment and defensive positions had given us the edge in the exchange rate. Something seemed off, though. The enemy force looked smaller than before. There were only 2 paths from the Rima River into No Rans, my territory with its wide roads, or the longer route through Lancer Fortress, held by a left faction earl. Had the bulk of the Beastman army gone that way? If so, Lancer's defenses were nothing compared to mine. They'd punch right through and reach Blackstone Fortress, No Ran's last great defensive line. But I shook the thought away. Noran's fate wasn't my problem. That was Zeluk's responsibility. If the beastmen hadn't attacked my land, I wouldn't have lifted a finger. But if they wanted to pass through Luika territory, that was never going to happen. If they wanted war, I'd fight to the very end. Far away in old Luika territory, Norl noticed something strange that morning. Not a single merchant had shown up, when normally there'd be a long line. He stopped a passing trader and learned that the Beastman army had broken through Lancer Fortress and was marching toward Blackstone. The trader warned him to tell his lord to flee. Norl immediately understood. If the Beastmen had crossed the Rima River, my territory was taking the hit directly. The fact that they'd gone around meant we must already be in a fierce fight. He decided to take 3,000 soldiers and rush to reinforce me, leaving just 500 old guards behind. Back at Luika, Nethers had been attacking for 3 straight days with his 20,000 troops and couldn't break through. He'd lost over 10,000 men, while our losses kept shrinking. Without battering rams or catapults, ladders alone couldn't take our walls. Narancel, our half-elf high mage, had been devastating their charges with wind magic, blowing waves of dog soldiers off the walls. He couldn't fight every day, though. He needed time to recover his magic reserves. From his position, Nethers watched our walls for 2 days, puzzled by why my soldiers' morale stayed so high despite thousands of casualties. Then he spotted it. Me, standing on the wall in noble clothes, calmly giving orders with Reyna guarding me. That was why. Their lord was fighting alongside them. Nethers licked his fangs. Kill the noble, and the humans' morale would collapse. He sent several powerful officers, each with combat ratings around 90, to distract Reyna while he prepared his real attack. The officers charged up the ladders straight at me. Reyna stepped in front, her eyes burning red with dragon slits. Despite their strength, they were nothing compared to her combat rating of 168. She sliced through the first one instantly and moved to finish the others. That was the opening Nethers needed. While Reyna was occupied, he grabbed a battle axe and hurled it at me with everything he had. I'd been focused on the Beastman formations below. I didn't see it coming. By the time I noticed, a spinning axe was already filling my vision. Am I going to die? That was my first thought. There was no way to block that kind of force. The axe hit, but the blood and gore I expected never came. Baidi's pendant in my pocket erupted with brilliant light, forming a barrier that absorbed the killing blow. But the impact still launched me backward off the top of the wall. Wind roared in my ears as I fell from that towering height. My body slammed into the ground on the other side. Everything went black. Master, Reyna's scream tore through the battlefield the moment I fell. What happened next, I only learned later. The instant I hit the ground and stopped breathing, something inside Reyna snapped. An uncontrollable wave of freezing power erupted from her body. Snow began falling from the sky in the middle of spring. Her eyes locked onto Nethers, the one who'd killed me. She vanished from the wall like a ghost, cutting every beastman in her path clean in half. She closed hundreds of meters in a single breath and swung her sword at Nethers. He blocked with his magic axe, shattering her iron blade into fragments that cut her face. That only made her angrier. Dragon Spirit Blessing activated. Her horns grew, her tail appeared, and she punched straight through his enchanted armor that could stop a crossbow bolt. The impact sent him flying. For the first time in his life, the proud beastfolk general thought about running. Then the thunder of hooves shook the earth. Norl had arrived with thousands of heavy cavalry from Old Luika, smashing into the beastmen's rear without hesitation. And from the walls, a massive fireball, bigger than anything the beastmen had ever seen, slammed into their densest formation, killing hundreds in a single blast. Saruka had made it. A magic master had entered the fight. Nethers lost all will to fight. With Reyna hunting him and magic raining down, he grabbed his axe and fled. When someone shouted that the general had run, the remaining 5,000 beastmen collapsed into a panicked rout. Norl's cavalry chased them down mercilessly. But Reyna didn't care about victory. She ran to where I'd fallen, calling for me over and over. Her dragon features had fully returned. Aria's concealment spell had broken. She found me lying in a pool of blood, silent and still. Saruka followed and saw me too. She dropped to her knees like her whole world had shattered. He won't. He can't. Saruka crawled to my side, all dignity forgotten. Reyna held me in her arms and felt for a pulse. It was there barely, faint and fading. Saruka, find a priest. Please, hurry. But Saruka remembered something Arya had once told her. Dragons could form symbiotic contracts with humans. Reyna's blood, even as a mixed blood dragon, carried tremendous life force. It could keep me alive, at least temporarily. Reyna didn't hesitate for even a second. She bit her own finger and let her blood flow into my mouth. Red tears fell from her eyes as she held me. Master, you have to be okay, please. Don't leave Reyna alone. While I lay unconscious, the world kept moving. Yoruna Kesha was the holy maiden of the No-Rand's church, a figure so important that kings of all three nations had to treat her with the highest honors. The church hierarchy went from low and mid-level priests up to high priests, bishops, and archbishops. But the holy maiden stood above them all. There was only one at any time, and she could directly command every church priest across No-Rand's, Yad, and Rima. Even the beast folk, elves, and water tribes on other continents gave the church respect. Nobody wanted to provoke a neutral power that controlled all healing. Her great-grandfather Helen Kesha had been the continent's greatest grand mage, trained by Arya herself. Her mother was the previous holy maiden, a beloved healer. Yoruna inherited both her great-grandfather's immense magic reserves and her mother's compassion and healing mastery. She could heal on a massive scale, even regrow lost limbs. As long as someone still had a breath left in them, she could bring them back. Not from death itself, but from its doorstep. Priests were untouchable, even in war. All three human nations followed that rule. Getting on the wrong side of healers, in a world with primitive medicine, was basically a death sentence. The church maintained over 1 million white armor guards to enforce that neutrality. Anyone who disrespected the Holy Maiden would face their wrath. Arya had written to Yoruna asking her to go to Luika territory and save a dying Viscount, me. Yoruna had heard of me before. The man who captured 2 Rima royals. The inventor of cream, which she'd recently become quite fond of. Since Arya was asking, she wouldn't refuse. She dressed herself perfectly. A holy maiden had to look flawless at all times, and left the cathedral with her white armor escort. Outside, the world had fallen apart. The beast folk had smashed through Blackstone Fortress. Michelle's betrayal had worked exactly as planned, and the capital was under attack. Only a few thousand soldiers and the Griffin Knights remained to defend it, and the sounds of battle were fading. Zeluk and his main army were trapped far away, pinned down by sudden attacks from Rima and Yad. The capital's fall was inevitable. Refugees flooded the roads. Yoruna saw them everywhere, families fleeing homes that had been safe just yesterday. Some lucky ones found shelter near the church, where the white armor guards kept beastmen away. But most would face slaughter or slavery. She wore a small gray ring on her finger, passed down from her mother. Her mother had told her that when she met her destined person, the ring would glow blue and transform, just as it had when her mother met her father. It would store vast amounts of magic and speed up spellcasting. After her father died, the ring had gone gray again. Yoruna had never seen it light up for anyone. Princes, genius mages, master alchemists, they'd all tried to win her heart, but none of them interested her. She could read their desires in their eyes, and it bored her. Holy Maiden, Luika territory is just ahead, a white armor knight reported. I know, she replied quietly. I'd been unconscious for 5 days. Barely alive, my pulse so faint that Elyulu, Reyna, and Saruka thought I might already be dead. The 3 of them never left my bedside, not even for a moment. Reyna's dragon body could handle the exhaustion, but Elyulu and Saruka were pale and hollow-eyed, barely eating, their eyes red from crying. Reyna's blood had kept me clinging to life, but it wasn't a permanent solution. Without real help, I was going to die. Thankfully, Arya had contacted the Holy Maiden of the Church, Yoruna Kesha. She was the most powerful healer on the entire continent. Her great-grandfather had been the greatest grand mage ever, trained by Arya. Her mother was the previous Holy Maiden. Yoruna could heal anything short of actual death, even regrow lost limbs. As long as there was still a single breath left, she could bring someone back. Meanwhile, Enkuna had been comforting Saruka, who finally broke down crying in her arms. I'm so scared he won't wake up. Enkuna gently stroked her head. He won't leave us. He's going to lead us to a better life. Enkuna realized that without me, Luika territory had become her home, a place that held her friends, her family. She had nowhere else to go. When the butler announced the Holy Maiden's arrival, everyone tensed with hope. Yoruna walked in with an apologetic smile. Am I too late? She glanced at Saruka. So this was Arya's new student, a cat girl, likely from the Nash tribe. Then she looked at me lying on the bed. Even she had to admit I was quite handsome, despite looking like a ghost. She placed her hand over me and felt my life force, barely a thread, held together by something powerful. She frowned, worried it might be an alchemical drug with dangerous side effects that could interfere with her healing magic. When she asked, Reyna spoke up. I gave him my blood. Yoruna relaxed when she saw Reyna's horns and tail. Dragon blood, that was fine. If Reyna had been a pure-blooded dragon, the blood alone might have been too much for my weak body. But mixed-blood dragon was manageable. She put on white gloves and released her healing magic. A gentle white light spread over me, and some color returned to my face. But my pulse was still too weak. She needed something stronger. She slipped on the gray ring her mother had left her, a habit when casting high-level healing, and unleashed a far more powerful wave of sacred magic. The light was so bright everyone had to look away. Sweat beaded on Yoruna's forehead. Even for someone as strong as her, this level of healing drained enormous reserves. Gradually, my pulse steadied. My breathing returned. She exhaled with relief. I was saved. She was about to pocket the ring when she noticed something. It had turned blue. The dull gray ring that had never reacted to anyone, not princes, not genius mages, not master alchemists, was now glowing a deep, mesmerizing blue, warm to the touch. Just like her mother had described. Just like the first time she'd seen it as a child. The ring was supposed to change color when she met her destined person. Yoruna's mind went blank. She stared at me, still unconscious on the bed, and felt her heart flutter with confusion. Him? This Viscount. He was impressive, sure, but compared to her family's status, he was nothing special. Though, he was quite good-looking. She wondered what kind of person I really was. After a long pause, she asked the girls a question that caught them all completely off guard. Your Viscount. Is he married? They all stared at her blankly. Elialu recovered first. The young master isn't married. No wife, no concubines. He just turned 18. Yoruna let out a quiet breath of relief. She eyed the collection of pretty girls surrounding my bed with a slightly suspicious look. This Viscount certainly seemed to attract a lot of beautiful women. Take good care of him. He should wake up soon. She left the room without another word, following the butler down the hallway. I felt like I'd been drifting through endless darkness for ages. Then something warm pulled me back. When I finally opened my eyes, I could barely move. My hand felt something warm. Elialu had been holding it the whole time. Reyna and Saruka were asleep leaning against my bed. They all looked exhausted. Then I remembered. The axe. Baidi's dragon pendant had saved my life with a burst of white light, but the impact still knocked me off the wall. A fall from that height had nearly killed me. I looked at my hand and suddenly, for the first time ever, I could see my own status panel. Lin Wei. Combat, 5. Strategy, 80. Special talents. Extraordinary personal charisma, transmigrator, and high purity, white dragon blood, currently boosting recovery and combat stats. Evaluation, B5? My combat rating was 5. I was weaker than those elf children I'd bought. After nearly dying, I finally understood. Being lazy about training wasn't an option anymore. In this world, I needed at least some ability to protect myself. Elialu noticed me stirring first. Her eyes flew open and filled with tears. Young master, you're finally awake. I was so scared. Saruka and Reyna woke up too, crying with relief. It was like their son had come back. The Holy Maiden Yoruna stayed in Luika territory for several days after healing me, waiting until I could walk again. She spent the time exploring my domain with obvious interest. She'd traveled across all 3 kingdoms with her mother spreading the church's teachings and had seen many noble territories. She said mine was unlike any of them. The people weren't thin and hungry. They smiled. Their eyes were bright with hope. She couldn't believe a border territory could achieve what even the great capital cities couldn't, making sure nobody went hungry. She went up to the walls and saw the mountains of corpses still being cleared away. The stench was terrible. She could tell the beastmen had suffered badly here. In her estimation, this was a battle worthy of the history books. tens of thousands of my soldiers holding off a 200,000-strong army. She also noticed I had many wounded soldiers the local priests couldn't handle, so she healed as many as she could. She couldn't figure out why the capital had never responded to our calls for help. After thinking about it, she seemed to piece together what must have happened with Michelle and Blackstone Fortress. But she didn't care about royal politics. When she came down from the wall, I was waiting for her. I was still weak, but I'd come to find her on purpose. I bowed deeply. "Thank you for saving my life, Holy Maiden." She laughed softly, showing 2 small dimples. She was beautiful, golden hair falling straight like a waterfall, brown eyes studying me intently, a perfect figure that even her loose white robes couldn't hide. "You shouldn't thank me. Thank Duchess Arya." If she hadn't asked, I wouldn't have come. "I need to thank Arya too," I said. "But you're the one who actually saved me. That gratitude is yours." She turned serious. "Then how will you thank me?" I froze. I hadn't expected the Holy Maiden to actually ask for payment. Wasn't this supposed to be the part where we exchanged polite words and moved on? She was the Holy Maiden. What could she possibly need from me? "Whatever you want. If it's within my power, I'll do it." She tapped her cheek with one delicate finger and smiled. "How about buying me dinner? Having a meal with a lady. That's not a bad deal, is it?" I was stunned. I'd braced myself for some enormous request, but she only wanted dinner? "It would be my honor to invite a lady to dine with me," I said, giving her a proper gentleman's bow. She laughed, a sound like silver bells. Something about the way she kept looking at me felt strange, though. Not hostile, but intense. The kitchen staff and head maid helped prepare the meal. Roasted suckling pig, golden and glistening. These were special pigs fed wheat and wild mushrooms, costing over 200 gold each. Pan-seared goose liver. 3 bottles of aged wine at 1,000 gold coins per bottle. Soft white bread with jams and cream. The whole dinner cost me over 3,000 gold. The wine alone was most of it, and I felt the sting in my wallet. Most extravagant meal of my entire life. It was just the 2 of us, with maids serving. Yoruna ate elegantly, small bites, small sips. I tried not to stare at her, but something kept pulling my attention back. Weird. I normally had decent resistance to beautiful women. What was happening to me? After we'd eaten our fill, I raised my glass again. "Thank you once more for saving my life. Whenever you need anything from me, I'll help without hesitation." She smiled. "You're still calling me Holy Maiden and using formal language. Do I really seem that unapproachable?" She told me her name was Yoruna Kesha and asked me to call her Yoruna. She asked if she could call me Lin Wei. I agreed, a bit confused about where this was heading. Then she pretended to be slightly drunk, touching her forehead delicately. "Lin Wei, those maids and subhuman girls around you. They're all quite beautiful, aren't they?" "They work for Luika territory," I said honestly. "We're just employer and employees." And it was true. Women only slow down your sword arm. She laughed at that. She'd already spent days in my manor listening to the maids' gossip. Apparently they all said the young master was too upright and hadn't been with a woman despite turning 18. The civilians praised me endlessly too. She knew the answer before she asked. Then her expression turned serious. The tipsy act vanished completely. "Lin Wei, how would you feel if I became your wife?" My brain shut down. Like 10,000 dragons had stampeded across my skull. "Isn't this a bit sudden?" She seemed pleased by my flustered reaction. She calmly wiped her lips. "If you're willing, we could get engaged now and marry in 2 years after we know each other better. I'm not forcing you to decide tonight. I'm leaving tomorrow. Send me your answer whenever you're ready. No, Rands is in chaos right now, but I promise those beast men won't touch your territory." She stood up and gave me one last look, a glance loaded with more charm than I knew what to do with. Then she left. I sat there, brain completely blank. The Holy Maiden of the Church just proposed to me? A woman who could have any man on the continent? Why me? Because I'm handsome? I thought about it more seriously. Women slow down your sword arm, sure. But a rich woman doesn't. A rich woman buys you a better sword. Yoruna was incredibly wealthy. She commanded over 1 million white armor guards. If we had a daughter, she'd practically be guaranteed to become the next Holy Maiden. But could something this good really just fall from the sky? Was she trying to harvest my organs or something? The next morning, she spoke privately with the senior priest stationed in Luika territory before leaving. The priest bowed and nodded frantically, apparently making promises. When I walked her to the gates, She stood by her carriage and smiled warmly. My offer has no expiration date. But don't keep a lady waiting too long. That wouldn't be gentlemanly. This wasn't drunk talk anymore. She was completely serious. I'll give your proposal careful thought, Miss Yoruna. Safe travels. Then, in front of all my guards and her white armor escort, she stepped forward and gently hugged me. Everyone froze. My soldiers, her knights, even my butler's jaw dropped. Well then, I'll be going. She smelled wonderful, a clean, delicate fragrance that belonged only to the holy maiden. After her carriage disappeared down the road, I stood there for a long time, unable to think straight. After Yoruna left, it hit me. I'd forgotten to check her status panel the entire time. Something had been subtly influencing me whenever she was near. From dinner to her departure, I'd felt this strange pull, like I'd known her before even though we'd just met. I shook it off. Next time, we'd see each other again. What I didn't know was that Yoruna had been using a small charm spell on me the whole time, a trick her mother taught her. It made people more likely to notice her good qualities. Nothing dangerous, and anyone with strong willpower could resist it completely. She was surprised I hadn't been affected much, since I had no magic reserves to protect me. She'd actually been holding back, worried about overdoing it. In her carriage, she smiled to herself, remembering an afternoon years ago when she'd first met me as a child. So much time had passed. That little boy had grown into a lord who could hold his own. Meanwhile, in the capital, the nightmare I'd feared had come true. The Beastmen had taken the city. Michelle's betrayal worked. He'd opened Blackstone Fortress from the inside, letting them pour through. The Griffin Knights fought to the last man, all several thousand of them, killing over 10,000 elite beastmen at a 10-to-1 ratio. But there were too few of them. Michelle stood in the conquered capital, furious. Monliad was sitting on the throne, and when Michelle demanded they honor their deal, take the loot and leave, the priest just laughed at him. Our king ordered us to occupy the capital. My deal with you can't override the king's command. Unless you'd like to fight our army, Michelle had bet everything on the beastmen suffering heavy losses that would leave his 30,000 troops as the strongest force. Instead, they'd come with 200,000. Even after 70,000 casualties, they still had over 130,000. His 30,000 were nothing. He'd gambled and lost spectacularly. If the people of Norans ever learned he'd opened the gates to beastmen, they'd tear him apart. The beast folk now held the capital with over 100,000 troops behind high walls. Even when Zeluk's 150,000 soldiers returned, if they could break free from the Rima and Yad forces pinning them down, retaking the city would be nearly impossible. The beastmen planned to expand outward from the capital, conquering noble territories one by one. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were enslaved. Only the neutral powers were untouchable. The church with its million-strong white armor, the Magic Academy, and the Alchemy Association. Monley had lounged on the throne, quite pleased with himself. But one thing nagged at him. It had been a week since he'd entered the city. Where was Nethers? Had that fool and his 20,000 elite troops really been destroyed at Luica? After Yoruna left, it hit me. I'd forgotten to check her status panel the entire time. Something had been subtly influencing me whenever she was near. From dinner to her departure, I'd felt this strange pull, like I'd known her before even though we'd just met. I shook it off. Next time, we'd see each other again. What I didn't know was that Yoruna had been using a small charm spell on me the whole time, a trick her mother taught her. It made people more likely to notice her good qualities. Nothing dangerous, and anyone with strong willpower could resist it completely. She was surprised I hadn't been affected much, since I had no magic reserves to protect me. She'd actually been holding back, worried about overdoing it. In her carriage, she smiled to herself, remembering an afternoon years ago when she'd first met me as a child. So much time had passed. That little boy had grown into a lord who could hold his own. Meanwhile, in the capital, the nightmare I'd feared had come true. The beastmen had taken the city. Michelle's betrayal worked. He'd opened Blackstone Fortress from the inside, letting them pour through. The Griffin Knights fought to the last man, all several thousand of them, killing over 10,000 elite beastmen at a 10-to-1 ratio. But there were too few of them. Michelle stood in the conquered capital, furious. Monliad was sitting on the throne, and when Michelle demanded they honor their deal, take the loot and leave, the priest just laughed at him. Our king ordered us to occupy the capital. My deal with you can't override the king's command. Unless you'd like to fight our army, Michel had bet everything on the beastmen suffering heavy losses that would leave his 30,000 troops as the strongest force. Instead, they'd come with 200,000. Even after 70,000 casualties, they still had over 130,000. His 30,000 were nothing. He'd gambled and lost spectacularly. If the people of Norans ever learned he'd opened the gates to beastmen, they'd tear him apart. The beast folk now held the capital with over 100,000 troops behind high walls. Even when Zeluk's 150,000 soldiers returned, if they could break free from the Rima and Yad forces pinning them down, retaking the city would be nearly impossible. The beastmen planned to expand outward from the capital, conquering noble territories one by one. Hundreds of thousands of civilians were enslaved. Only the neutral powers were untouchable. The church with its million-strong white armor, the Magic Academy, and the Alchemy Association. Monley had lounged on the throne, quite pleased with himself. But one thing nagged at him. It had been a week since he'd entered the city. Where was Nethers? Had that fool and his 20,000 elite troops really been destroyed at Luica? After the beastmen took the capital, they slaughtered every noble they could find. Men were killed on the spot. Ugly women became slaves for the soldiers. Pretty ones were kept for the Beast King to decide. Within a week, every powerful noble's estate was wiped clean, including Duke Simon's. Noble corpses hung from the walls alongside commoners. At least commoners could be used as slaves. Nobles were considered useless and dangerous, so they were all eliminated. Monley had sent 30,000 troops outward from the capital to conquer surrounding noble territories. Then he received a letter from his king, praising him and promising him land of his own after the campaign. But the letter ended with a very specific warning: do not touch Luica territory. When Monley had checked the map and realized Luica territory was the same place where he'd first been stopped, cold sweat ran down his back. Nethers might still be fighting there. He quickly decided to blame everything on Nethers and distance himself from the whole mess. The reason for the warning became clear at the Beast King's court. King Cash had received 2 letters, one from the Succubus Kingdom and one from the Human Church. Both demanded that Luica territory be left alone. These were threats he couldn't ignore. The Succubus Empress was terrifyingly powerful on her own, and she had a frost dragon. The church had over 1 million white armor soldiers. Fighting either one, let alone both, would be suicide, especially with rival beast tribes like the cat people and lizard folk watching for any weakness. Cash immediately wrote to Monleyid ordering him to stay away from my territory. Then Nethers limped into the throne room, badly wounded, with a hole punched through his chest armor. He expected punishment for his defeat. Instead, the king embraced him as a hero. Since the capital had fallen, every commander who'd participated shared in the glory. Nethers was given the prestigious surname Gindafrost, an honor held by fewer than 5 warriors in all of Beastfolk history. Nethers was completely confused. He'd lost badly, but apparently Monleyid had taken the capital, so his role in pinning down Noran's elite forces counted as a valuable contribution. He wept with gratitude, swearing eternal loyalty. Far away, Bidey heard about Noran's fall too. She'd already sent a letter through her officials to protect me, paying back one more favor. The pendant she'd given me had blocked one fatal attack, just as she'd intended. Whatever happened beyond that, she figured she'd done her part. Her own Succubus Kingdom had just stabilized after the rebellion, and she had plenty of her own problems to handle. So that was why the Beastmen would leave my territory alone. 2 of the most powerful forces on the continent, the Church and the Succubus Empress, had both drawn a line around Luica. I didn't know any of this yet, but their protection would prove to be the most valuable shield I'd ever have. My body was recovering well. I could finally check my own status panel whenever I wanted. Combat 7, Strategy 80. The dragon blood from Reyna was continuously improving my recovery and strength. 2 whole points of combat gained just from the blood. Considering I'd started at 5, that was nearly a 50% increase. If I could kill 1 chicken before, maybe now I could handle 2.5. Just as Yoruna had promised, no beastmen came near us for the entire week after she left. But a different problem arrived: refugees. Thousands of people fleeing the fallen capital and surrounding territories started pouring toward Luica. At first I took some in, but the numbers kept growing. Within days, over 50,000 refugees had gathered around my walls. These weren't like my loyal citizens. They'd lost their families, their homes, everything. Desperation bred crime. Luika's previously peaceful streets became restless. Some refugees started stealing from our wheat fields and orchards outside the walls. Little Shalais was drowning in paperwork, trying to manage it all. The refugees who couldn't get inside just camped along the walls, lighting fires, digging up wild plants, and raiding our crops. If this continued, they'd strip the land bare and surround us completely. I had to act. These people were both a problem and an opportunity. If handled badly, they'd cause riots. If handled well, they'd become new citizens and make my territory stronger. The land between the city walls and the Rima River was huge, big enough for another whole settlement. But placing people there meant putting them in danger if the beastmen ever crossed the river again. And with only 4,000 guards left after the battle, I couldn't spare troops to protect them out there. I went up to the wall. Saruka cast a wind spell so my voice would carry far. I know you've all been through terrible things, but that does not give you the right to steal Luika's crops. I called Ankro's name. He marched out with dozens of armored guards, pulled out the ones who'd been stealing, and broke their arms and legs right there. The crowd went silent. Under Noran's law, I could have made them slaves. Breaking their limbs was mercy. I will give you space to live. But if you break my rules, you will learn that a noble's dignity is not something you can trample. Fear settled over the crowd. They'd been getting bolder because I hadn't responded. Now they understood. Then I softened my voice. But I'm not a heartless lord either. I'll allow you to settle the land between Luika's walls and the Rima River. You can build homes and farm there. In exchange, you'll work 8 hours a day building walls and fortifications for me. I'll provide 2 meals a day. The crowd erupted in grateful shouts. 2 meals and a place to live was more than any of them had dared hope for. What they didn't realize was that the land I was giving them sat right in the path of any future beastman invasion. Until new walls were built, these refugees would serve as a natural buffer zone for Luika. I wasn't going to send my depleted forces out to protect them. 2 meals a day was already generous beyond what any other lord would offer. They would never have the same rights as my original citizens. But it was better than starving in the wilderness, and it served my purposes perfectly. Things were worse than I'd imagined. The refugees kept coming, from 10 or 20,000 to 50,000, now hundreds of thousands. The numbers grew every day. This meant Noran's defenses had completely collapsed. Most civilians had been captured or killed by the beastmen. The ones reaching me were the lucky few. More people meant more mouths. My original territory had only 60 or 70,000 residents, and now the refugees outnumbered them. I'd stopped receiving cream profits from the Far East Trading Company. It must have been destroyed in the chaos. I wondered if Vis was even alive. He'd been close to becoming a Viscount, and now everything was gone. If the cream recipe leaked during the war, he technically owed me 1,000,000 gold coins in penalties. But that only mattered if he survived. Food was my biggest headache. I'd stockpiled plenty, but not for this many people. I'd promised 2 meals a day, even if it was just black bread. Breaking that promise would destroy my credibility. The refugees were already clearing the forest between my walls and the Rima River to build wooden shelters. The dense trees provided enough lumber, but once the forest was gone, my hunters would lose their livelihood and meat would eventually disappear from the market. I needed to get farmland cleared fast so these people could feed themselves. The soil near the river was decent, at least. I just had to pray our supplies would last until the first harvest. Bigland was thriving. The battlefield had yielded mountains of steel and refined iron from destroyed weapons and armor. His smithy had grown to hundreds of workers, with experienced Noran's blacksmiths learning under him. His skill had reached a new level. He was now forging weapons with special properties like armor piercing and blade breaking, effects that normally only appeared on magical equipment. He achieved this just by mixing in rare metals. A regular sword sold for 50 gold, but one with armor piercing could fetch 500. These weapons required higher combat stats to wield, but after surviving that brutal battle, most of my guards had reached 50 or higher in combat rating, with some hitting 60 or 70. My forces were now stronger than the Royal Guard. I promoted several outstanding soldiers to squad leaders to fill the gaps. Ankro was officially knighted. I wished Ikshin could have been too. He'd earned it. Far away, Zeluk was losing his mind. He'd never imagined the Beastmen would break through Blackstone while he was away conquering new territory. He wanted to turn back, but Yad and Rima forces kept him pinned down, forcing him to watch his kingdom fall. His eldest son had vanished, probably dead alongside the 50,000 guards and Griffin Knights who'd fought to the last. He finally suspected Michel had betrayed him, but couldn't bring himself to believe it. Duke Simon told him what he wanted to hear, that Michel must have been killed or kidnapped by traitors among his guards. Zeluk calmed down slightly. He still had 300,000 troops between the royal army and noble forces. As long as he lived, Norans wouldn't die. The newly conquered plains and forests gave them breathing room. And eventually, without Norans to unite against, Yad and Rima would turn on each other over how to split the spoils. The Beastmen had won the biggest prize, Rima had suffered, and Yad had gained nothing. That imbalance would breed conflict soon enough. Summer arrived again. The refugees had mostly settled down. Some had built homes in the forest between my walls and the Rima River, and the new city wall was being constructed day by day. The Beastmen did appear on the far side of the river a few times, but they always headed toward the old Lancer fortress direction, completely ignoring us. Just as Yoruna had promised, they didn't bother Luoko at all. I stayed cautious, but I had to admit, her word carried incredible weight. She'd been writing me letters every now and then. Nothing pushy about the proposal, just asking how I was doing, sharing little things from her daily life. The spacing was perfect. Not so frequent it felt annoying, not so rare I'd forget about her. She knew exactly how to maintain the right distance. I'd been training hard since nearly dying. Every morning, I joined the soldiers for drills. My combat rating had climbed from 7 all the way to 20. The dragon blood buff had finally worn off after being fully absorbed, but the gains stayed. I was still weak compared to any real fighter, but so much stronger than before. Another year of this, and I might actually become a passable warrior. Of course, I only had training time because little Shalais kept handling most of my paperwork. Letters kept arriving from Fedra's barony and other small noble territories, inviting me to join a new Norans noble alliance to resist the Beastmen. I rejected every single one. Eventually, I stopped even replying. These scattered minor nobles couldn't fight as one. They'd just argue about who goes first and fall apart. I was better off alone. The real crisis was food. My wheat reserves were running dangerously low. Even if autumn crops came in, there wouldn't be enough for everyone through winter. The big trading companies inside Norans had collapsed. Buying grain from Rima or Yad was theoretically possible, but merchants had stopped traveling because of the war. I needed my own trading company to sell our surplus weapons abroad. Bigland's old swords could fetch good prices in other kingdoms. Weapons always sold. I just needed someone trustworthy to run a merchant operation. I was about to go search among the refugees for potential merchants when the butler knocked again. "Sir, the holy maiden Yoruna is here. I wasn't expecting her today." When I found her in the garden, she wasn't wearing her usual white holy robes. Instead, she had on a fitted lavender dress with fringe details that showed off her figure in a completely different way. Her bare calves swung playfully beneath the hem. She was in a good mood. "There you are, Linwei." Her smile was warm and sweet, those little dimples showing. "Miss Yoruna, it's an honor." She gave me a mock scolding look. That strange feeling hit me again, but now that I'd been training, I noticed it more clearly. Something was subtly influencing my mind. Was she using some kind of charm magic on me? But what could she possibly want from me? Didn't I say we don't need to be so formal? I brought you a surprise this time. Whatever spell she was casting, I decided I could forgive it. Her smile really was that beautiful. "What surprise?" "I brought you a large shipment of wheat and some priests. That should get you through winter." She paused. "Also a full set of magical weapons. And a few griffin cubs." My brain stopped working. Wheat to survive winter. Priests to heal my people. Magic weapons. And griffin cubs, the foundation for my own Griffin Knight Corps. Any one of these would have been an extraordinary gift. A thought surged through me before I could stop it. Maybe marrying this gorgeous, generous, impossibly wealthy woman wasn't such a bad idea after all. "How can I ever repay you?" I stammered. The wheat alone was a lifesaver. But a full set of magical weapons? Griffin cubs? A single griffin cub had sold for 100,000 gold coins at auction 10 years ago, the last time one was ever publicly available. A breeding pair went for over 200,000. Only the Norans royal family had ever managed to breed them at scale. These particular cubs had been gifts from the royals to curry favor with Yoruna. "No need to repay me," she said sweetly. "What's mine will be yours eventually anyway." I felt my defenses crumbling. A nobleman shouldn't bow for 5 bushels of rice. "You're joking. But truly, if you ever need anything from me, I won't refuse." Just then the door opened. Saruka, Elialu, and Reyna walked in carrying cream bread with little candles stuck in them. "Young master, happy birthday. Master, happy birthday. Master, happy birthday." I'd completely forgotten. I'd just turned 18. Yoruna looked surprised too. "Oh, today is your birthday? Happy birthday, Linwei." The girls' expressions shifted when they saw Yoruna was here. They'd planned this surprise carefully, and this uninvited guest had stumbled right into it. Something about her smile made them feel like they'd been outmaneuvered by a cunning woman. After the sweets, I ran off to see the griffin cubs. As a transmigrator, I'd never seen one up close. They were already bigger than dogs despite being young. Golden eagle feathers on the front half, lion fur on the back, with beaks and talons that looked deadly even at this size. Their feathers were hard as steel. When they saw me, they flapped their wings and squawked threateningly, but they were too small to be scary. Just adorable, really. Taming griffins required a special process of wearing down their wild nature, unless you had a beast-taming talent. Luckily, I had Ancuna. Her beast-taming gift had been wasted on just training horses. Griffins were exactly what she was made for. While I was with the cubs, something interesting was happening back in the room. Yoruna had cornered Saruka alone. She studied the young magic master with an appraising look that made Saruka uncomfortable. Saruka glared back, but that only made Yoruna laugh. "Sister Saruka, may I call you that?" Saruka just huffed. She knew Yoruna was after me. She'd been eavesdropping outside the door the night Yoruna proposed. Yoruna showered Saruka with compliments about being such a young magic master, calling herself just a simple little priestess who'd been too stupid to learn magic from Arya. Saruka got completely flustered. The praise sounded genuine, and Yoruna was putting herself down. It was impossible to argue against. Then came the direct hit. Yoruna took Saruka's hands, looked her dead in the eyes, and asked, "Sister Saruka, you like Linwei too, don't you?" Saruka's cat ears spun like propellers. Her tail nearly lifted her off the ground. Aye. Yes. Then why don't we both marry him?" Saruka's brain short-circuited. "Wait, that was an option?" Yoruna pressed on. "But you haven't become a grand mage yet. Only a grand mage can truly protect Linwei from danger. You don't want what happened last time to happen again, do you?" Saruka nodded seriously. She needed to get stronger. "Come back to the capital with me tomorrow. I'll take you to Arya. Once you're a grand mage, nobody will ever be able to threaten Linwei again. Okay." Just like that, the poor little cat girl had been completely outmaneuvered. In Yoruna's mind, Saruka was her biggest rival for the position of primary wife. By sending her back to study, by the time Saruka returned, Yoruna could already have children old enough to buy soy sauce. And she'd done it all without using her charm magic. Saruka was a magic master, so that wouldn't work. Pure verbal manipulation. Brilliant and terrifying. I had underestimated this woman's resources. 500 carts of wheat, 10 tons each. Enough to feed my entire territory for years. 8 griffin cubs, for male and 4 female. Priests to heal my people. Magical weapons for my soldiers. A thought kept nagging at me. Maybe marrying this beautiful, wealthy, impossibly generous woman really was the smart play. She was a bit of a schemer, sure, but a rich schemer who kept showering me with nation-building gifts? That was a different category entirely. "The little griffins are cute, aren't they?" Yoruna's voice came from behind me while I was playing with the cubs. I turned and thanked her again. She'd done so much. The wheat, the weapons, the griffins, and most importantly, keeping the beastmen away with just her word. Without her, Luika might not even exist anymore. She just smiled. I could tell she was playing a long game, making me feel more and more indebted until I couldn't say no. She was patient. Then, finally, her status panel appeared before my eyes. Yoruna. Combat, 80. Strategy, 198. Favorability, 80. Special talents, healing super sense. All healing magic costs half as much. Faith icon. As a revered holy maiden, her magic reserves grow slowly every day from people's devotion. Magic wellspring. possesses a ring that stores enormous amounts of magic energy, already activated. I instinctively stepped back. 80 combat. That was higher than Ankro, my best remaining knight at 75. And she was a healer who could constantly restore herself. Ankro wouldn't stand a chance against her in a fight. She looked like a delicate young lady, but she could probably swing a warhammer better than most soldiers. And that strategy of 198, nearly 200. This woman was terrifyingly smart. If I married her without getting stronger first, I'd be permanently beneath her in every way. Can I stay overnight in Luika? She asked shyly, as if worried I'd refuse. Of course. Stay as long as you want. Luika always welcomes you. Meanwhile, outside my territory, the minor nobles were getting restless. They'd seen church supply wagons entering Luika and realized I had the backing of the church itself. Their little noble alliance, a dozen barons and 2 viscounts who'd banded together supposedly to fight the beastmen, was really just a loose collection of self-interested lords. Some wanted independence, some were loyal to the crown, some just wanted to ride out the chaos. One baron named Asen cursed me for refusing to join. Another pointed out that if I had the church behind me, they needed me even more. Their combined forces couldn't even scrape together 5,000 soldiers. Facing 100,000 beastmen would be suicide. Someone turned to Fedra. Baron Fedra, weren't you close with the Luika family? Can't you convince him? Fedra gave an awkward laugh. I'll try writing to him, but Ryan's been dead for years. I don't know how much pull I have with his son. He was lying, of course. He didn't want anyone to know our relationship had soured. He even slipped in a subtle trap. If I didn't respond, he could claim I'd gotten too big for my old connections. Baron Bona spoke up with genuine sincerity. Letters aren't enough. I'll go visit Viscount Linway personally and ask him to lead our alliance against the Beastmen. His family had served Norans loyally for generations, and he truly wanted to fight. The room went quiet. Everyone agreed. If I joined and brought the church's influence with me, their alliance would actually mean something. The church was a superpower that transcended nations, with influence across all 3 kingdoms. Divine authority had always stood above royal authority. Baron Fedra, let's go to Luika right now, Asen said. He won't turn away his father's old friend. Fedra cursed internally but had no choice. Refusing would look suspicious. Fine. Baron Asen and Baron Fedra rode up to Luika's gates with their guards. Asen spent the whole ride planning how to organize a military force once I joined their alliance. When my guards stopped them at the gate, Asen immediately pulled rank. Do you know who I am? How dare you block a noble? My soldiers frowned but held firm. They could see the noble crests but had orders not to let anyone in. Ankro appeared and told them calmly, Our lord isn't seeing visitors today. That set Fedra off. So Linway is too important to see his own uncle now? Our families were so close. Does that mean nothing just because Ryan died? He put on such a tearful performance that some of my guards started looking uncomfortable. They didn't know about my history with Fedra, and Ankro wasn't sure how to handle it either. Right then, Yaruna and I happened to walk out. I was seeing her off, and Saruka had suddenly decided she wanted to go back to study with Arya. The timing couldn't have been worse for Fedra. His face twisted the moment he saw me. Asen jumped off his horse with a big smile. Viscount Linway, I'm Baron Asen from the new Noble Alliance. The Empire needs us. I cut him off with a wave. I've already refused. Luika won't be joining your alliance. His smile froze. He looked desperately at Fedra for help, but Fedra had his head down, trying not to be noticed. Asen pressed on anyway. But your uncle came all this way to invite you personally. Won't you at least give him that respect? Uncle? Which uncle? What's his surname? Luika. I actually thought it might be news about one of my father's real brothers. Baron Fedra. Fedra's face turned bright red. He'd never expected me to walk out at that exact moment. Then Yaruna spoke up, stepping to my side. Her warm, gentle manner vanished completely. In its place was the cold authority of the Holy Maiden. Baron Fedra? The one who broke off the engagement with Linway? Asen's jaw dropped. He stared at Yaruna. You're the Holy Maiden of the Church? I am. Her icy presence made even Asen step back involuntarily. She turned to Fedra, who could no longer hide. He stumbled off his horse, sputtering excuses. I never said I wouldn't honor the marriage agreement. It's just that my daughter Lina disappeared. Yaruna shook her head. Do I really need to spell out how you unilaterally tore up the marriage contract? You're still a noble, Baron. Surely you care about your reputation? Fedra went pale. The church was known for knowing everything. If Yoruna had investigated this, she had proof. No amount of excuses would help. Lin Wei has the church's protection, Yoruna declared. He doesn't need your alliance. He'll be perfectly fine without you. Full protective wife mode activated. The barons couldn't get a word in. Asen glared at Fedra. This merchant-turned-noble had dragged him here under false pretenses, claiming to be my family when he'd actually burned that bridge years ago. No wonder I'd been ignoring their letters. Then, we'll be going, Asen muttered, and they all slunk away without a trace of their earlier arrogance. Once they were gone, Yoruna's cold aura melted instantly. She looked at me with a guilty, apologetic expression, her voice soft and small. I'm sorry, Lin Wei. I didn't mean to bring that up publicly. I just couldn't stand watching them try to use you. I shook my head. There's nothing to hide. After my father died, Fedra did break the engagement. I know exactly what kind of person he is. Thank you for standing up for me. She smiled. That warm, satisfied smile. Of course, whether you're right or wrong, I'll always stand by your side and support you. You can lean on me more, you know, I nodded, accepting Yoruna's words. Before leaving, she handed me a box. Inside was a church insignia. With it, my trading caravans could freely enter and do business in both Rima and Yad. This was incredibly valuable. Noranz was a war zone where commerce had collapsed, but the other two kingdoms were still relatively stable. The church's flag meant no one would dare harass my merchants, and they'd even get special treatment. Thank you, Yoruna. After accepting so many gifts, I felt bold enough to give her a quick hug. Her lips curved up, clearly pleased that her campaign was working. I didn't know it, but she was already planning to have an heir within the year. A boy to inherit Luika, a girl to become the next holy maiden. One little hug, and she'd practically picked out baby names. After I let go, Saruka bounced over. Master, me too. I gave her a gentle hug as well, then watched both of them leave. I sighed. If this kept up, I'd be completely lost in Yoruna's warmth. But honestly, she was kind, rich, attentive to my feelings, and respected my pride. I really did like her. Now I had the church's trade pass, but I needed someone to run the operation. I checked my original citizens before, nobody fit. Then while inspecting the refugee work crews, I spotted a man named Wilfry. Combat, 18. Strategy, 79. Loyalty, 40. Special talents, negotiation skills, and merchant's instinct. Perfect for the job, except his loyalty was too low for such a critical role. So I arranged a little scheme. I had a few guards rough him up over the course of a week. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to make his life miserable. Eventually his neighbors told him to report it to Knight Ankro, my trusted officer. When Wilfry found Ankro, Ankro immediately whipped the offending guards right in front of him. The punishment looked severe, blood seeping through their uniforms. Wilfry wasn't stupid. He knew if he let this go too far, those guards would hold a grudge. He begged Ankro to stop. Ankro put down the whip and apologized on their behalf. Then Ankro told him, "The Lord wants to see you personally to apologize." Wilfry's brain nearly exploded. A noble apologizing to a refugee? He was terrified it was a trap. He dropped to his knees, banging his head on the ground. I meant no disrespect. I'm grateful for everything. He even grabbed Ankro's whip and begged to be punished himself, insisting it must have been his own fault. When he was brought to me, he was shaking like a leaf. The moment I stood up, he threw himself on the floor. "Lord Lin Wei, it's my fault. I kept a straight face." "How is it your fault? Those soldiers bullied you." He kept slamming his forehead on the ground, insisting he must not have worked hard enough. I signaled Ankro to stop him before he cracked his skull open. "Wilfry, relax. I'm not an unreasonable lord. If my soldiers were wrong, they'll be punished. Everyone in Luika is treated equally, old residents and new." His loyalty jumped to 60. "Elialu, bring a few silver coins for him. Call it compensation for his injuries." His eyes went wide. Silver coins? As medical expenses? Was I actually God? Did kneeling and kowtowing produce money? Could he do a few more? His loyalty shot to 80. I placed the coins in his hand and looked him in the eye. "I think you have potential. Come work for me." The classic playbook. First the stick, then the carrot. Grandfather Edward would have been proud. Wilfry probably never imagined he'd go from being beaten up by guards to becoming president of the Luika Trading Company. I gave him real authority. He could recruit workers under the Luika family banner and request up to 1,000 guards as escorts until he built his own security force. His first shipments would be simple. Thousands of standard-issue longswords retired from my frontline troops after Bigland started forging weapons with special properties like armor piercing. These were still quality blades that would sell well in Rima and Yad. On top of that, I had the maids produce tens of thousands of jars of cream for export as luxury goods. Even at 10 gold coins per jar, that was over 100,000 gold in revenue, and the production cost was practically nothing. I handed him a shopping list on parchment. Most of it was alchemy tools and materials, only available in the Yad kingdom. Yad was notoriously hostile to foreign merchants, charging crushing export taxes that killed any profit. But with the church's trade pass from Uruna, we'd sail right through. The church insignia meant every kingdom would give us special treatment, and nobody would dare mess with us. Wolfrai walked out of my study standing tall. He came from a merchant family. His father had been vice president of a major trading company before losing a power struggle. He'd ended up as a farmer, then a refugee. Now I'd given him a chance to return to what he was born to do. With Uruna's financial support, I could finally rebuild my forces. I recruited 17,000 strong young men from the refugees and willing citizens. Ankro couldn't train that many alone, so I promoted 4 veteran guards with combat ratings around 70 to serve as squad captains. Half a month passed, and Luika was getting back on track. The refugee flow was slowing. The worst of the crisis had passed. The Noble Alliance stopped writing to me, and I didn't care what happened to them. Today I visited the griffin enclosure behind the manor. Ancuna had bonded wonderfully with the 8 cubs. They'd grown from the size of regular dogs to something like oversized golden retrievers. These little monsters were incredibly picky eaters, at least 2 short-tailed chickens per meal, 3 to 4 meals a day. I had over 2,000 chickens in the manor and was still buying more from villagers just to keep up. Master, you're here. Ancuna rode over on one of the griffins. When it saw me, it actually lowered its eagle head for me to pet. The rough, warm feathers felt surprisingly nice. Can they fly yet? She pointed at the one she was riding and 2 others. These 3 can already fly. The other 5 should be ready soon. She hopped off and patted its neck. Show him, a sharp eagle cry, and the griffin launched into the sky, cutting through the air at incredible speed. These creatures had extraordinary stamina. They could fly for a full day without tiring. Once they were fully grown, equipped with anti-magic armor and carrying elite knights, they'd become my absolute trump card on any battlefield. Far more devastating than heavy cavalry. You could stop cavalry with spear formations, but a fully armored griffin? Unless you shot clean through its wings, which were hard as steel on an adult, there was no stopping it. And unlike war horses, griffins were deadly fighters on their own. While my trading company was getting started, things were happening in Rima that I didn't know about yet. Princess Einweir had been pushing herself relentlessly since our encounter at George Fortress years ago. She'd become a high-level mage at just 20 years old, mastering 3 different types of elemental magic. She'd also been training in swordsmanship under Rima's greatest sword saint and studying alchemy under a succubus master. All because she'd never forgotten how I'd humiliated her, and apparently made a comment about how her hands felt nice. She'd been holding that grudge for years. She was so talented that Rima's own magic masters and grand mages said they couldn't teach her anymore. People recommended she seek out Arya in No-Rans, since Arya only cared about talent, not nationality. Arya had only taken 3 students in her life. 2 became grand mages, and the 3rd was considered a once-in-a-millennium genius. But with No-Rans in chaos and beastmen controlling most of the territory, her father wouldn't let her go. The amusing part happened when she was walking through the Rima capital and spotted a very familiar family crest, a flying blue bird on a merchant's flag. My family's banner. She couldn't believe it. No-Rans was burning, and I was sending merchants to do business? She marched into the winter trading company where Wolfrai was happily selling cream to the company president. When the president spotted the princess, he scrambled to attention. Wolfrai stayed composed. He represented Luika and the church, so he gave a polite bow, but nothing more. Einweir looked at him with barely concealed hostility. Your lord is Lin Wei, isn't he? Wolfrai immediately got a bad feeling. Based on the princess's expression, he jumped to the conclusion that I must have seduced and abandoned her. Internally, he was impressed. A foreign princess? His boss was truly a man among men. When she found out the trading company was selling cream, she glanced at the white, slightly yellow substance, and her face turned red for some reason. Then she tried to impose the highest tax rate on Wilfrey's goods out of spite. The Winter Trading Company president panicked. "Princess, we can't do that. This merchant operates under the church's trade pass. By Rima law, they get the lowest tariffs and duties." Einwehr's face twitched. Even a princess couldn't mess with the church. She backed down. "Fine. Follow the rules then." Wilfrey silently gave me a thumbs up in his heart. Not only was his boss connected to the Holy Maiden, even a foreign princess was getting jealous over him. A true role model for all men. While Noran's burned, Luika territory remained like a hidden paradise, peaceful and quiet. My guard force had grown to 20,000. 3,000 were battle-hardened veterans, the rest new recruits in training. Ankro was so busy as one of my 2 knights that he barely had time to drink at the tavern anymore. I'd posthumously knighted Akshan, but he had no family, no one to carry his name. The title just meant fancier words on a tombstone that nobody visited, except Ankro. One evening after a long day, Ankro poured fruit wine on Akshan's grave, as if his old friend could still drink it. He stood there quietly, then left without looking back. He didn't need to. Akshan's memory would stay alive in him forever. "Master, your tea." Reyna set a cup of red tea on my desk. Arya's disguise spell had broken during the battle with Nethers, but it didn't matter anymore. Ziluk had bigger problems than chasing after my dragon girl now. I noticed Reyna seemed flustered lately, her scales doing strange things whenever she looked at me. Apparently my training was making me more attractive. I checked my panel. Combat, 25, strategy, 80, still climbing. I glanced at Reyna and thought about how useful another dose of dragon blood would be. Great stuff, boosted endurance and combat stats. But I couldn't exactly ask her to bleed for me without a good reason. A knock at the door interrupted us. The butler brought a letter sealed with the Simon family crest. Duke Simon? He was supposed to be trapped with Ziluk in the plains. Why was he writing to me? The letter was full of flattery and praise, casually mentioning that King Ziluk greatly admired me. They wanted me to help reclaim lost territory. Clearly, word of my relationship with the church had reached them. But the real surprise was about Elyulu. Duke Simon claimed to be her father and wanted her back in the Simon family, offering her the prestigious Simon surname and even naming her as his heir. He proposed that if I married Elyulu, our children would receive full backing from the royal family and the left faction. He even generously added that Elyulu could be a concubine if I preferred. My primary wife could be someone else. I knew exactly who he meant. I almost laughed out loud. I'd always known Elyulu's father was some powerful left faction noble, but Duke Simon himself, the man who'd thrown out Elyulu's mother, a common maid, was now crawling back because all his legitimate children had probably been killed when the Beastmen sacked the capital. What a convenient time to remember his abandoned daughter. It was a transparent scheme. They were desperate. With the Beastmen holding the capital and most wealthy territories, the nobles trapped with Ziluk had nothing left. If they could connect to the church through me, it might be their only chance to turn things around. They knew my territory sat on a critical road, yet remained untouched. That was clearly the church's doing. "Reyna, go get Elyulu." When Elyulu arrived, still dusty from working with the elf maids, I told her straight. "Elyulu, your father has been found." "Oh," she said flatly. "You're not curious who he is?" She shook her head without hesitation. "I don't care who he is. My home is Luika territory. I want to stay by your side forever." I sighed and tossed the letter into the trash. "Then stay by my side forever." The bright, sparkling joy in her eyes gave me a feeling of deep, quiet peace. The Beastmen had held the capital for a while now. 2/3 of the population was gone, killed or enslaved. Only priests, mages, and alchemists were left untouched. Anyone who tried to resist got their head cut off. Things had finally stabilized, but it was a miserable kind of stability. Back at the Magic Academy, Saruka noticed Arya wasn't doing well. Her teacher kept picking up her tea and putting it down, her eyes drifting toward the window where the sounds of suffering civilians drifted in. As a Grand Mage and a White Elf, Arya had no obligation to save Norans. Her former student had only asked her to witness the kingdom's rise and fall, not to intervene. She could shelter the people who fled to the academy, but that was all. She couldn't exactly lead a human rebellion as an elf. And the truth was, Noran's nobility had been rotten for a long time. Maybe it was time for a change. She sighed, letting all her worries scatter in the wind. Then a faculty member arrived with news. A high-level mage wanted to become Aria's student. It was Princess Einweir from Rima. She'd come all the way here, and she was only 20 years old with a high-level mage certification. Impressive by normal standards. When Einweir saw Aria for the first time, even she was stunned by the Grand Mage's beauty. She introduced herself formally and asked to be accepted. Aria walked up to her, examined her calloused hands from sword training, and gave her verdict without hesitation. You're spreading yourself too thin. Swordsmanship, alchemy, and magic. Even a genius can't reach the peak in all three. At this rate, you might become a magic master in 20 years, but you'll never reach Grand Mage. Your talents are better suited for alchemy and the sword. Go home. You're not right for me. Einweir stood frozen. Rejected, just like that, after a single meeting. She refused to leave. I won't give up. I'll stay here until you change your mind. Saruka felt bad for her and tried to comfort her, explaining that Aria was usually gentle but absolutely rigid when it came to magic decisions. Einweir could feel the massive magical energy radiating from Saruka, far beyond her own. So this was the legendary genius, Aria's third student. She'd expected a Noran's native, not a catfolk girl. Neither of them realized they were both connected to the same man. If they had, the conversation probably wouldn't have been so friendly. Wulfry came back faster than I expected. A round trip to Yad and Rima normally took over 2 months, but he'd left in summer and was back before autumn ended. The church's trade pass made everything smooth. Lowest tariffs, no delays at any gate. He'd only brought 10,000 jars of cream, keeping supplies scarce to drive up prices. Each jar sold for 100 gold coins, 10 times what we'd charged in Norans. Even at that price, demand outstripped supply. Of course, prices would drop once we increased production, but for now the profit was staggering. Over 1 million gold from cream alone. The 5,200 swords sold at 70 gold each too, above my minimum target of 50. He'd also given away 200 weapons as gifts to build goodwill with trading partners, exactly as I'd instructed. And he'd bought 3,000 warhorses as I'd requested. I had the butler count out 1,000 gold coins and handed the heavy bag to Wulfry. Good work. This is your bonus. He dropped to his knees in gratitude. His loyalty hit 100. With that kind of money, he could buy a house in Luica and start a family. I decided to stop selling weapons going forward. The cream profits dwarfed everything else, and the retired swords could serve as training equipment. After expenses, taxes, purchases, the horses, I netted about 500,000 gold. Not bad, but it disappeared fast. I ordered new stables built for the 3,000 horses, since our old facilities only held 1,000. I also had craftsmen build a separate alchemy workshop away from the castle. Alchemy experiments could go wrong, and I didn't want an explosion taking out my home. Once the workshop was ready, little Nashia practically lived in it. The elf girl was obsessed. Following the alchemy books Wulfry had bought, her success rate was absurdly high. She barely wasted any materials. She was a natural. Today she presented her first breakthrough, 100 strength potions. She explained with a perfectly innocent expression, these should temporarily double a person's strength. The stronger someone already is, the weaker the effect. As for side effects, the test mice died, but it probably won't be that bad for humans. Most likely just 3 days of vomiting and diarrhea with no appetite. I stared at this sweet little girl casually mentioning dead mice and felt my scalp tingle. She looked up at me with those pure eyes, waiting for praise. I patted her head and she hugged my leg happily. The other elf assistants lined up for head pats too. I offered 5 silver coins to any volunteer willing to test the potions, with 50 gold coins going to their families if anything went wrong. Several people stepped forward. A few elderly men past their prime and a hunter who'd lost a leg in an accident. They figured if they died, at least their families would be set for years. The one-legged hunter drank first. His face turned bright red as power surged through his body. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he threw away his crutch and stood perfectly balanced on his single leg. The old men turned red-faced too, looking like they had limitless energy. The potions clearly worked. Now we just had to wait and see if the side effects were really as mild as Nashia predicted, or as deadly as those mice suggested. The alchemy experiment was a success. Nobody died. After 3 days, the volunteers just had some vomiting and diarrhea, then they were fine. I kept having guards check on them daily all the way through winter. No long-term side effects appeared. Nashia's strength potions were ready for real use. From what I could tell, each potion boosted a person's combat rating by about 20 points for 1 day. On a battlefield, that kind of edge could be devastating. But the after effects were rough enough that I'd only use them as a last resort. The second day after the first snowfall, a familiar fancy church carriage pulled up to Luika. Yoruna stepped out wrapped in a thick white coat. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw me. She looked me over and seemed pleased. I'd filled out from all the training, my face more defined, my frame sturdier. As she stepped down from the carriage, she pretended to stumble and fell right into my arms. Through her heavy coat, I could hear my own heartbeat speed up. The white armor guards and my soldiers all politely looked away. After a moment of holding her, I awkwardly asked if she was all right. She gave me a helpless little look. "Thank you, Linwei." I almost embarrassed myself. Neither of us wanted to let go of each other's warmth. But with everyone watching, we separated. She'd brought more gifts. Armor for the Griffins, forged from insulation steel and thunder meteorite iron. Incredible defensive gear against both magic and physical attacks. Another delivery from the bottomless wealth of my rich lady. Though I had to wonder, she could have just sent someone with this. Did she really need to come personally? In winter? I was right to wonder. She planned to stay the whole season. Inside the warm castle, Elialu served us tea with a polite but slightly sour expression. The little maid wasn't happy about how close Yoruna and I were getting, but she kept quiet. She knew Yoruna as Lady of Luika would be the smart choice. Once we were alone with our tea, Yoruna asked me something unexpected. "Linwei, do you remember where we first met?" "Of course, the day you healed me. I'll never forget that." She shook her head with a gentle laugh. "That's not it. Think harder. Get it right, and there's a reward." I was confused. That was definitely our first meeting, wasn't it? But her favorability toward me had climbed from 80 to 90 since last time. Something was driving her feelings that I didn't understand. She was beautiful, powerful, and wealthy. Why was she so devoted to me? "Can I get a hint?" She put on a hurt expression, her eyes reddening. "You really forgot." I panicked. "I'm sorry. I'll remember. Just give me a moment." I didn't catch the tiny smile she tried to hide. 10 years ago. In front of the Magic Academy. 10 years ago. The memories surfaced slowly. My father Ryan had taken me to the Magic Academy one afternoon, hoping I could learn magic. The teacher had examined me and told my father regretfully that I had no talent for it at all. That day, had I met Yoruna there? My father Ryan had actually been more devastated than me that day at the Magic Academy. I'd only recently transmigrated and was pretty content being a noble's son, eating 3 meals a day, reading history books, with Elialu and the head maid taking care of everything. I didn't awaken my ability to see people's status panels until years later, which is why I couldn't really do much until I inherited the barony. The memory was old, but it came back. That afternoon, after being told I had no magic talent, I'd noticed a girl crouching by the academy entrance, crying. I felt bad for her and gave her a shiny gemstone pendant, a birthday gift from my father. I told her she was pretty and should smile more, that no matter how hard life gets, you have to face it with a smile. I had no idea that tiny act of kindness would save my life years later. Yoruna pulled the pendant from around her neck. It was worn but lovingly preserved. "Do you remember this?" "I do," I said, my voice going soft despite myself. She told me her mother, the previous holy maiden, a great healer, had just died from a sudden illness. The irony of a healer dying to disease wasn't lost on her. At only a young age, she'd had to leave the Magic Academy and return to the church to take her mother's place. That was the day we'd met. I sat beside her and let her lean on my shoulder. I didn't know what to say, so I just offered that. It seemed to be enough. After our talk, I left to help Shalais with some paperwork. What I didn't know was that Yoruna went straight to the main hall where Elialu and Reyna were washing my bed sheets. She got right to the point with Elialu. "Linwei told you about the Simon family, didn't he? Don't you want to go back and be a duke's daughter?" Elialu shook her head without hesitation. "I only want to stay by the young master's side. If the old lord hadn't taken in my mother, I'd be dead." I don't need the Simon name. I'm just Elialu. Then Yuruna dropped the real question. Do you like Lin Wei? Elialu didn't panic like Saruka had. She answered calmly. Of course I like him. I liked him before, I like him now, and I'll always like him most. Yuruna nodded. If I become the Lady of Luca, I'll allow you to be his concubine. Elialu froze for a moment. Then joy flickered across her eyes. She'd always expected me to marry someone. She just feared being pushed away afterward. All she wanted was to stay near me. That was enough. Thank you, Miss Yuruna. This time she didn't call her Holy Maiden. Then Yuruna turned to Reina, whose tail was already swinging wildly. You're the White Enchantress? Reina blushed and nodded. If I become the Lady of Luca, you can be Lin Wei's concubine too. What do you say? Reina's tail went into overdrive. The three girls reached an unspoken agreement right there. They all knew I'd need a primary wife eventually, and an unknown woman might not be so generous. Yuruna was offering them guaranteed positions at my side. With her blessing, they could openly be part of my life. Maybe even have children. Compared to the uncertainty of whoever else might come along, Yuruna was by far the safest bet. This woman's level of strategy was terrifying. She'd already sent Saruka, her biggest rival for the primary wife position, back to study magic. Now she'd secured the loyalty of every other girl around me by promising them exactly what they wanted. All while I was in my study doing paperwork, completely oblivious. The rich lady's game was several moves ahead of mine. The griffins seemed more energetic in winter. After months of feeding, all 8 had grown to the size of calves. Their feathers gleamed, their beaks were razor-sharp, and their claws had thickened considerably. They'd entered their youth stage. By next winter they'd be fully mature adults, as big as elephants. Griffins could live over 70 years, but only took 2 years to fully grow. Once well fed, they'd start breeding too. I'd been riding them occasionally, soaring through the clouds. With my combat rating now decent enough that I wouldn't fall off, I could actually enjoy the rush of wind at high altitude. From up there, I could see everything. Rima River raging below, the beast folk lands shimmering on the far horizon, and to the left, a massive mountain range with snow-capped peaks so steep that nothing without wings could climb them. Curiosity got the better of me. I'd heard tavern rumors that the other side held beast folk territory, or maybe a dragon guarding its treasure. I directed the griffin over the peaks. No dragon, just endless winding mountains dotted with small settlements, yurt-like tents with campfires. Lizard folk tribes, scattered across the valleys like stars. I already had about 200 lizard folk in my territory and had always thought about expanding that number. But getting my army over those mountains was impossible, and building ships for the Rima River was equally impractical without something like the beast folk's water rhinos. I filed the information away for later. Someday, when Luca was strong enough, those mountains would be mine. When I landed, Yuruna was waiting with a scolding look. You went flying again? Look at you. The moisture in your hair turned to ice up there. She gently brushed the ice crystals from my head, her eyes a mix of worry and tenderness. She'd been living in Luca for 2 months now. Winter was half over, and when the snow melted, she'd probably leave. I'd gotten used to having her around. The thought of her leaving made me feel a little empty. Whether I wanted to admit it or not, I was starting to have real feelings for her. She took my frozen hands in her warm ones, and the heat seemed to reach somewhere deeper than just my fingers. Far away, Zeluk and his nobles were having a miserable winter. Trapped in the Rima forests with 300,000 troops and civilians, their supply lines from the capital were cut off by the beastmen. People were starving. The king who'd once ruled a kingdom was now little more than a refugee himself. Duke Simon was especially desperate. All his sons were dead, killed when the beastmen sacked the capital. His only surviving child was Elialu, who'd ignored his letter completely. Too old and worn out to father more children, he'd pinned his last hopes on her carrying on the Simon bloodline through a marriage with me. But she'd rather stay as my maid than return as a duke's daughter. Simon proposed a scheme to Zeluk. We spread rumors in Luica territory that Lin Wei is disloyal to the crown. Many of his citizens still have deep loyalty to the royal family. It's branded into their thinking. If we create enough doubt, the pressure from his own people will force him to submit and bring the church's backing with him. Zeluk finally nodded. They were out of options. Without siege equipment, they couldn't take back any fortresses by force. Their only weapon left was manipulation. Norrell had been managing Old Luika territory well. He'd bought back all the mining operations that had been contracted out, and things were moving in the right direction. He could see that No Rands was falling apart under Zeluk's incompetent rule, and he believed I would eventually declare independence. He respected my abilities, my eye for talent, my vision for development. The only thing I lacked was personal fighting strength. Recently, some troublemakers started spreading rumors in Old Luika that I was disloyal to the crown. Clearly, the royal family was trying to turn my own people against me. Norrell handled it immediately. He had the instigators dragged out and their limbs broken in front of everyone. He shouted at the crowd, "If you don't trust Lord Linway, the gates are open. But don't forget who gave you wheat bread instead of black bread. Who wants to go find the king in the wilderness? Go ahead. I won't stop you." Nobody said another word after that. In New Luika, the scheme was even more laughable. The agents sent to spread rumors were caught by my own citizens and dragged straight to my manor. My people had watched me stand on the walls and fight the Beastman army with them. They loved me from the bottom of their hearts. They didn't care if I declared himself king. It made no difference to them. As winter neared its end, I found myself staring out the window feeling strangely melancholy. These past months with Urina had been wonderful. She'd been by my side constantly. She even learned to cook for me and picked it up terrifyingly fast, figuring out exactly what I liked within a month. I'd noticed Elialu and Reyna seemed to genuinely like her too, always hanging out together. Whenever Urina came to see me, those two conveniently disappeared. Late one night, I heard her familiar footsteps in the hallway. "Linway, are you awake?" I opened the door. She stood there in a thin sleeping gown, holding a pair of blue knitted gloves she'd just finished making. "I made these. They might not look great, but I hope you like them." Winter only had a month left, so the gloves wouldn't be useful for long. But the warmth of her heart behind them meant everything. I put them on. They still carried her body heat. "Thank you, Urina. I love them." Her eyes curved into crescents. She hadn't used her charm magic on me once during these months in Luika. Everything I felt right now was completely real. "I'm thirsty. Can I come in for some water?" I stepped aside without thinking. She poured herself water using my cup without hesitation, then walked to the window. The night was quiet, insects chirping in the darkness. Something stirred deep inside me, a sudden, overwhelming desire to spend the rest of my life with this woman. She turned to face me. Her eyes were soft, full of feelings she could barely contain. "Linway, the moonlight is beautiful tonight, isn't it?" I walked to her side. "Yes. It really is." We stood in silence, just looking at each other. "Urina, what you said before. Does the offer still stand?" Her heartbeat quickened. "What offer?" I don't remember. For all her brilliant scheming, she was still a girl who'd never been in love. Her composure cracked, replaced by something genuine and vulnerable. I went to the cabinet by my bed and took out a ring, the only thing my mother had left me. I'd kept it all this time, and tonight it finally had a purpose. I knelt on one knee and kissed the back of her hand. "Miss Urina, will you be my wife?" "I do." Urina's eyes glistened. For all her scheming and confidence, in that moment she was just an ordinary girl being proposed to by the boy she loved. I carefully slid the ring onto her left hand. Something heavy lifted from my chest, like a leaf finally finding where it belonged. Her smile, those dimples, they made me feel drunk. Outside, a shooting star crossed the sky. The twin blood moons seemed to overlap, their light falling gently on the windowsill. The next morning, Urina dressed me with gentle hands, her eyes soft as water. They say a boy becomes a man when he's ready to take responsibility for someone else's life. After all my years in this world, I finally felt like I truly belonged here. I took her hand while she was buttoning my shirt. "From now on, you're the Lady of Luika." She blushed. "When do we announce it?" "Whenever you want." She tapped my forehead with one finger. "I'll tell the bishops as soon as I get back." We announced the engagement officially. I understood the implications. Once this became public, I'd be permanently marked as part of the church. Anyone wanting to challenge me would have to consider the Holy Maiden's wrath. If we had a daughter someday, she'd almost certainly become the next Holy Maiden. But it also meant I couldn't openly invade other nations. The church's neutrality depended on centuries of trust. Both my territories would get priority protection from the white armor guards and priests, which would accelerate development enormously. The trade-off was clear. I couldn't attack others, but nobody would dare attack me. And if someday I grew strong enough, I could always work through proxies. As long as my name wasn't on it directly, that would be enough. Elialu and Reina could tell something had changed about me that morning. They knew what had happened, but they'd already made their arrangement with Yoruna. They weren't upset. If anything, they were looking forward to their turn after Yoruna had the first child and secured an heir. I was in such a good mood that I gave every single person in the manor and the army a silver coin and half a day off. 20-something thousand silver coins was only about 2,000 gold, nothing to me now. Sharing my happiness was worth every coin. The maids cheered, the soldiers roared their approval. Winter ended quickly. Yoruna had been very proactive during those final weeks. When it was time for her to leave for spring duties, church sermons, and charity work, the farewell was bittersweet. She hugged me and whispered, "Write to me if you miss me." I stroked her hair. "Stay safe on the road." After her carriage disappeared from view, my heart felt strangely empty. The news of our engagement spread fast and hit like a thunderbolt. Countless young nobles across Rima and Yad who dreamed of winning the holy maiden's heart were devastated. A viscount from a crumbling kingdom? Some swore to challenge me and prove they were more worthy. If only they knew she'd been the one chasing me the entire time. At the Magic Academy, Arya sipped her tea and raised an eyebrow when she heard. She was surprised and a bit frustrated on Saruka's behalf. Her foolish student had gone to Luika and still gotten outmaneuvered. In Arya's mind, Saruka should have been the primary wife. Now she'd probably end up as a concubine. Thankfully, Saruka was buried in the library studying magic and hadn't heard the news yet. When she did find out, well, there would probably be tears. Lots of them. Far away, Zeluk was losing his mind again. His scheme to turn my people against me had completely failed. The winter had been brutal for them. 40,000 civilians froze to death, hundreds of royal guards perished, and even the king himself could only eat plain white bread with no meat. When news of my engagement to Yoruna reached him, his fury boiled over. He must have been kicking himself. If he'd never tried to take Reina from me, I'd probably still be a loyal subject. But he couldn't tell anyone the real reason I'd turned against the crown. And now he had to worry that I might tell Yoruna about what he'd done, which could bring the church's judgment down on him. He had no choice but to focus on building a new capital and hope his people could survive another winter. Duke Simon was in even worse shape emotionally. All his children were dead except Elialu, and she'd rather be my maid than his daughter. He sat in his chair, supposedly a duke, yet possessing absolutely nothing. Meanwhile, at the Magic Academy, Einwir had been staying for a while. Arya still refused to take her as a student, but didn't stop her from studying there. The academy was open to all dedicated mages. Without a proper teacher, Einwir had grown close to Saruka instead. They'd become real friends, chatting about everything. Einwir shared stories about Rima's customs and nobility, and Saruka helped her with magic problems. Saruka's talent covered many elements, so she could teach Einwir quite a lot. Neither of them knew about the other's connection to me. One afternoon, they were eating lunch together in the cafeteria. Saruka kept piling meat onto Einwir's plate. The cat girl couldn't live without meat, while the princess kept a strict diet. They were getting along beautifully when voices from the next table drifted over. "Did you hear? The Holy Maiden got engaged. To some noble from Norans." "Really?" "With Norans falling apart, she still picked one of their nobles. What's his name?" "Something. Luika, I think." "You mean Linway Luika? The legendary viscount who captured the Rima royals?" "That's the one." Saruka's spoon clattered to the floor. For a moment, she thought her ears had betrayed her. The bishops noticed Yoruna had been in an excellent mood since returning from Luika. There was something different about her. Less girlish innocence, more womanly charm. She was humming songs on her way to the next church event when a white armor guard informed her that Saruka had come to see her. She'd expected this. The cat girl had finally heard the news. Saruka was sitting in the reception room, tail swishing back and forth, face calm, but eyes brewing a storm. She'd come for answers, but Yoruna was several levels above her. Before Saruka could say a word, Yoruna rushed over with a beaming smile, grabbed her hands, and gushed about how much she'd missed her big sister. Saruka's brain short-circuited. She forgot what she'd come to say. Every time Saruka tried to bring up the engagement, Yoruna cut her off, offering her special berries that boost magic energy, asking if they were tasty, changing the subject with perfect timing. Then came the knockout blow. Sister Saruka, when are you going to marry Lin Wei? Then we can all be together forever. Why don't you get engaged to him too? Saruka's anger evaporated instantly. Engaged. To Master. Really? Of course. I love you, sister. I want us all to be with Lin Wei forever. The poor cat girl was completely outmaneuvered again. She'd never even thought about competing for the primary wife position. She just wanted to be near me. If sharing with Yurina meant she could stay by my side, that was fine. Her tail started swinging happily. Mission accomplished for Yurina. But you have to become a grand mage first, sister. Then you'll never have to leave Lin Wei's side. Same trick, same result. Saruka nodded earnestly. She really did need to get stronger. Maybe she could even bring Arya to live in Luika territory someday, so everyone she loved would be together. Since you're already here, come help me with the charity sermons, Yurina said sweetly, and the defenseless cat girl agreed without a fight. Winter melted into spring. Wolfrai headed out again with another shipment of cream, this time as a married man. He'd wed a Luika citizen over the winter and built a proper house with the gold I'd paid him. He was no longer a refugee, he had a real life now. The new city walls were coming along beautifully. They were wider and tougher than the old ones, with crossbows positioned to cover the entire Rima River. Tall arrow towers dotted the fortifications, ready for archers or mages to rain destruction from above. Standing on those walls, I could hear the river roaring below. The new settlement had grown impressively, though the sheer number of refugees made it feel crowded. That gave me an idea. Beyond the mountains across the river, I'd seen those lizard folk settlements in fertile valleys. If I could bring that land into my territory, I'd have room to expand and grow even stronger. The problem was crossing the Rima River. I couldn't exactly ferry an army over on 8 griffins, too slow. I needed shipbuilders. With so many refugees, surely someone among them knew how to build boats. And if I couldn't find anyone, well, I could always write to my fiancée. Yurina could fix just about anything. I'd gotten used to it by now. A man asking his wife for help isn't shameful. Besides, everything I built would belong to our children someday.